Just before I start, everybody can stay seated. And I'd just like, before we start, to welcome you back, Councillor Gordon Markward. Councillor Markward's been on a leave of absence for a number of months. But before I start, the General Manager has to read out the conditions of you attending and acknowledgement of what those conditions are tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This meeting is recorded and live streamed for public viewing via the internet in accordance with Council's Code of Meeting Practice, with the recording stored and made available to the public for later viewing. The recording is subject to copyright. Members of the public attending or speaking at this meeting will be recorded and publicly broadcast. By attending this meeting, you voluntarily consent to your attendance and participation being recorded. Any part of the meeting that is held in closed session will not be live streamed. Council requests that everyone present is respectful and uses appropriate language. Council does not accept liability for any defamatory, discriminatory or offensive comments that are made during the course of the meeting. Please ensure that all electronic devices, including mobile phones, are switched to silent. Under the Code of Meeting Practice, public recording of this meeting is prohibited without prior authorisation by Council. Council's live streaming of meetings via Facebook is designed to encourage constructive dialogue. We remind users to be digitally responsible and respect their fellow posters. We ask users to keep comments relevant and not to spam or post personal or commercially sensitive information. This includes content that may be defamatory, derogatory, offensive or discriminatory towards council employees, councillors, other persons or organisations. Failure to follow Facebook house rules will result in comments being deleted, and if this behaviour persists, the user will be blocked.
Thank you, Madam General Manager. If you all could be upstanding now, please, for the commencement of the meeting. And I'd just like to welcome Pastor Paul Crossman. Welcome again, Pastor, for opening the final meeting of Council for 2019 in prayer. Thank you.
Well, the business of Council looks grave tonight, 150 pages odd of business here, and I'm sure it's all important, and I'm sure it's all vital, and I'm sure it's all about what's best for our community. But pressing on us as a Shire is the issue of fires and the great work that the volunteer fire service are doing, and I'd just like us to pray into that a little bit tonight as we start this meeting, if we could. Heavenly Father, we just come before you and we hold up our Shire in all its beauty and its vastness, but it's terribly dry and tinder dry in many, many places, if not most places. And we see fires breaking out and sweeping across our Shire with damage to property and infrastructure and all of those things that are there, and not just now, but imminent danger around us everywhere. Not just our Shire, but our state, not just our state, but our country really needs your hand to pour out rain across our nation. We ask you, Lord, to look with grace upon us and send that rain that we so desperately need, not just 1 or 2 days worth, but a really good soaking rain that will bring life back to our parched land. So we commit that to you and ask your blessing. We thank you for the volunteers who almost daily put their lives on the line for our Shire, for our people. We ask your richest blessing on them and their families. Protect what they own and protect their families as well, we pray. And Lord, yes, it is a council meeting, and here's the business of council tonight. We ask your blessing on these men and on the council itself in this last meeting for the year, that they will have wisdom and understanding of what the issues are, and that they'll be able to make decisions based on what is best for our community. And we ask it together in Jesus' wonderful name. Amen.
Thank you, Pastor, and thank you for coming along on a regular basis and opening the meeting with prayer. Sorry, Councillor, you have to be just upstairs again for acknowledgement of country. I did it back to front, and over to you. Last acknowledgement of country, Councillor Peter Nelson.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Acknowledgement of country. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land and pay my respect to elders, both past, present and emerging. I would also like to extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders present here today.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Now, before we commence the meeting, we have a few pleasant items to do. One, and I'll ask Mr. Pepping. We have 3 awards to give out tonight. So I'll hand over to Mr. Pepping, who will introduce them and then introduce the staff members.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So it is my pleasure to present not 1, not 2, but 3 awards to yourself and council and the community this afternoon. And the first award, Steve Rosa has got there, and it was an award given to Destination Southern Highlands for the 3rd year running at the Canberra Region Tourism Awards for the fantastic event that is held now called Pie Time. So as I said, this is the 3rd year that we've won that event. And earlier this year, we also got the Gold Award in the National Tourism Award. So winning it again this year will also makes us an entrance into the National Awards again in March next year. So I'll call on Steve to present the certificate.
It gives me great pleasure on behalf of the team at Destination Southern Highlands, based over at the Welcome Centre, to present to Council this great award, which was proudly accepted there just over a week ago in Canberra. So hopefully we can do the region proud come the 6th of March next year. We vie against the best of the best from each of the states. We're up against our contenders from Kimberley's in WA, who won it 2 years ago. So we'll see if we can beat them again this year, going forward with our great campaign.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Well done, Steve.
Before you go, Steve, this time, or a little bit later, when the annual awards were being given, and I'm not saying Steve wins so many awards that he gets blasé, but when he was successful on behalf of council and winning the Gold Award he was down in Hobart, and he sent me a message at I think about 10 o'clock at night containing his excitement. Nobody knew about this. He's getting too easy. You're getting too many, too easy.
They're never easy, I can assure you. The amount of work that goes into it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the second award, both of these are from the Local Government New South Wales Annual Awards. The first one was in the category of roadside environmental management, and Council's entrance was a winner in that particular division for Integrated Roadside Environmental Management Framework. Just very quickly, the project developed 3 tools that are integrated into Council's roadside management plan, including an improved mapping tool, environmental guidelines for common management activities, and the position statements for the community. Council focused on a collaborative approach in order to capture corporate knowledge, build staff awareness and gain consensus on management activities. The project has built Council's understanding of roadside management and developed easy-to-use tools as a central point of reference. That's that one.
Did that one come just to me?
Oh yeah.
Okay, thank you. Great work by the council staff in relation to this. So, will you?
That's
pass
the environmental sustainability team. Yep.
Will you pass on congratulations?
I will.
And just to Steve, and I didn't say, to your team over there at the Welcome Centre, they do a terrific job. They're great ambassadors to the Shire. And will you pass on council's thanks?
And lastly, this award is for the category of behaviour change in waste. It was a highly commended award, and it was for engaging with Wingecarribee community to reduce and avoid waste. As we all know, Wingecarribee Shire Council continues to be a leader in the state in waste recycling rates and the recovery of resources from landfill. So this particular category was about waste education program engaged with the local community and schools through workshops and activities. Workshops teach participants how to avoid a range of plastic containers and products that can be difficult to recycle and to compost their food and garden waste at home. The school's waste audit program engaged students to develop alternatives to avoid, recycle or reuse what is generated as much as possible. So I'll present that one.
Thank you very much.
And that's our waste team out of the Resource Recovery Centre.
So we do have a very efficient and responsible council staff. They are doing great work for us in the vast majority of time. And we've got to remember the good work that council achieves and just leave some of the nitpicking. Look, there's three issues that I'd like to raise that will be raised before we go on with the meeting, and we do have a big agenda. But Councillor Graham Andrews, I think, would like to make comment to council and councils as well.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And while we're thanking people, if I may indulge, for the last 20 odd years, myself and my family have been putting a Christmas tree up on the northern side of the Mittagong Playhouse, a tree provided by the old Mittagong Chamber and Del Dempster. Unfortunately, that tree is past its use-by date, but lo and behold, a magnificent tree, I might add, has landed on the front lawn of the Welcome Centre in Mittagong. So on behalf of the people of Mittagong and the northern villages, in the great spirit of Christmas, I wish to thank Council and in particular Greg Bray and his crew for that tree. That magnificent, truly is symbol of Christmas. Thank you.
Thanks, Graham, and thank Councillor Andrews, and thank you for acknowledging that. Councillor Gordon Markward, as I welcome him back, would also like to make a comment.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. I must press the button. I've forgotten in 3 months how to do that. I'd just like to acknowledge I have been away for a few months. Unfortunately, it wasn't planned. I just want to make a statement in public as to what the issue was. I was diagnosed with Parkinson's some time ago, and I had a bad reaction to certain medication and drugs. I needed a few months off to sort that out. It's all sorted. I'm back, and I'll basically be speaking my mind here tonight. If I see any notes of emotions I don't like, I may happen to say something about it. So I'm back. Thank you.
Okay, you're not the black cat though, are you? Look, the other thing I'd like to say, it's not a Mineral Minute or anything, but just to advise that last night I attended a public meeting at the Hilltop Recreation Hall that was called by the police and the RFS, Senior Inspector John Klepsarek and our bushfire control. It had about 265 residents in attendance. It was extremely well attended. There is a great deal of concern in relation to the northern villages and where this fire may end up from down in Lake Burragarang. It is in Urandery. It is a huge fire. It's up to 115,000 hectares. And there is no stopping it. It is just too big. There is containment lines being put in place. I'm not sure how long they'll be, but they're going to be many kilometres long, and will start from down the back of back behind Buxton, running right around to High Range to try and build a containment line with, I don't know how big the bulldozers are, but they're just clearing a fire break. So all I'm saying is that if you live in the Shire, please be aware. We could be suffering and under major bushfire conditions in the next week. There is no certainty that this fire can be contained or stopped, and subject to wind conditions, it will have a huge bearing on the northern villages. So if you know people, if you can just be aware, and if you have, and in those situations, as was stressed last night, extremely strongly by Dave Stimpson, if you have live in those sort of areas as I do, make sure you have a bushfire plan that you can instigate and follow at instant direction. Okay, so
Mr Mayor,
Councillor Nelson.
excuse me, do you think that you could ring the Prime Minister and ask him if he could probably get the Defence Forces involved to stop this? Because of yesterday's briefing, he believed everything was under control.
Funnily enough, you asked that. I know it's you asked that question was asked last night. Will the federal government? They will be under advice from the RFS, and the RFS will be advising the federal government, I would think. The other thing is we are under a section, I think it's a 41 fire emergency. So in relation to any fire issues, we take direction from the RFS and the police force. So if you see things happening and roads closed or whatever, it's not council, it is the RFS directing council's involvement, and we will be obeying their instructions and helping where possible. So if we now move to, we have adoption of the previous minutes. Thank you, Madam General Manager. Held on and we have no apologies, we have a full complement, and that is good for the last meeting. Of the minutes held on the 27th of November, move Councillor McLaughlin, seconded Councillor Whipper. Is there any discussion on the correctness of the minutes? Then I put them all in favour, against carried. We now move on to declarations of interest, if any. Councillor Halstead.
Yes, item 9.4, it's a review of a DA in Bowral Road, Bowral. My son's a director of the company recently appointed as the certifier. With respect to that development, it'll be a non-pecuniary interest, non-significant, but I'll leave the chamber, not vote.
Thank you, Councillor Halstead. Any further? Councillor Scandrett.
Two to declare, Mr Mayor. One is item 12.4 of section 8.2 review of 144 Mount Broughton Road, a shed that is slightly over the permissible size. I'm one of the owners, so I will leave the room when that item commences. And I also need a form, if possible, please, Ms Lidgard.
I'll have one. I
have a form, thank you, which is for item 9.3, subdivision of land and works to create two lots at 278 Goldenvale Road, Sutton Forest. I'm a member of the National Trust. It's a non-pecuniary, non-significant, I'll say, in the chamber.
Thank you, Councillor Scandrett. No further. Councillor McLaughlin.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, look, I have a less than significant conflict of interest with 9.2, the Waterbrook Seniors Housing Development. I do reside in West Bowral, but I do not have any other interest. It will not be positive or negative. I did stand for council saying that I would oppose any inappropriate development. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McLaughlin. We have a mayoral minute, and that is in relation to renew our libraries phase 2. Councillor Nelson, would you like you moving it? Do I have a seconder? Councillor, and what was your name again? Councillor Markward. It's in relation to the first round of the Renew Our Libraries campaign of $65 million over the next 4 years, I think, which was lobbied very heavily by the Local Government Association, in which we made a submission after a motion moved by Councillor Peter Nelson that we do so. So there you go, Councillor Nelson, whether it was your motion or not, but there was a substantial amount of monies increased to the state libraries.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Look, after the last election, I actually made representation to the local member in relation to library funding, and I actually got a letter back from the Minister. Anyway, in his letter, he used a little bit of smoke and mirrors to say that funding was increasing, but would not commit to indexing the funding increase. Indexing the funding increase. This means that at the end of the day, Mr Mayor, library funding can be cut and our support for libraries will continue to go backwards. So you've got to remember that New South Wales, which is the premier state, funds libraries the least amount of any other state in Australia. So I support this recommendation to renew our libraries phase 2, which is to index the funding, protect the funding.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. Any further debate? Put the recommendation. All in favour? Those against, carried. So we now turn to the public forum, and we have who's going to speak? Mr. Uliana. Are you here, Mr. Uliana? Yes, if you'd like to come forward. It's in relation to a review of 10.04.405 submission, residential alterations and additions to Mount Broughton Road.
Hi, how are you? 5 minutes, no questions.
What's that?
5 minutes?
Yeah,
with
no
questions.
worries, yeah. Look, I should be short today. Okay, thanks very much. Yeah, Robert Juliana, 102 Mount Broughton Road at Werroi. Look, about a year ago, this came up. 144 Mount Broughton Road, our neighbour, unfortunately had to leave the room. Proposed to build a shed, look, very close, or 2 metres from our boundary in an E3 zone. We made an objection at that time because, unfortunately, at the time, council staff had recommended approval, so we were a little bit concerned about that, and we thought we better, come and object. And since then, through not my deciding, but the councillors deciding, it went to a peer review. It went to Goulburn Mulwaree Council. Look, as far as I could see in the minutes, it came back quite favourably for us, 100% favourably, I thought. I thought they were happy with our objections, and they also thought that it probably shouldn't be approved in that location. Look, from there, we obviously got this review, 8.2 review, and as far as I know, I'm not certain it went to another council or went to someone else independent, and those comments have come back, again, 100% in our favour. So since then, and again, what I can see from the minutes, I see that council staff have, probably thought that, recommending refusal was probably appropriate, just in regards to, going to maybe 2 peer reviews. So first of all, I just want to say thank you, guys, and General Manager and Nick Wilton and Mark. Just wanted to say thanks very much for that recommendation. That's just made us feel a little bit easier about the whole situation. I just wanted to say that I just wanted to respond just to the applicant's submissions on the minutes. And look, it's taken us 11 years to get to this point. But look, an E3 zone is a sensitive zone. We've done a lot of work. Our neighbour at 144, look, it's taken him about 9 years to get to his stage. So look, really, what's the point of bringing that up at all? Look, I just want to let you know that we did have substantial commencement by the council at that time. And look, it's not, it's fact. We have it here in writing. I think you have a copy of it yourselves. Substantial commencement is substantial commencement. and just to let you know, we at that time we employed the services of Powerline Design, a gentleman by the name of Lawrence McKinnon. Lawrence McKinnon needed to get an approval from Endeavour Energy for the extra load on the house. So the comments made in regards to solar only look incorrect. The fact is that Lawrence McKinnon got the approval from Endeavour Energy. I've got a letter here from from Integral Energy at that time saying that it was an approved plan. I've got a letter here from Mr McKinnon in regards to the power design. Delonra here in Mossvale went ahead and installed the transformer. A nice lady across the road, Sandy Moss, who was part of the famous Moss family, she was able to create an easement over her own property in our favour in regards to our extra power for our new residents. Richard Manning, another popular guy in town from Aquaman, done all our trenching works. Approximately 1,000 metres, and Matthew Burke Electrical connected the service. And sure, the other comment that was made was primarily that service was just to put in to replace what was existing. Sure, while we removed 4 to 5 power poles in the process, we livened up everything else that was existing. The poles that were there were aged, and we thought it was smart to just go underground at the time. Look, a lot of thought and consideration was put into designing our home, and John Webb, who designed our home, is here tonight supporting me. Look, John Webb's been around for a long time. He gave us the ins and outs of what we need to do. We took advantage of the 360-degree vistas, incorporating the landscaping and the outbuildings. And as Goulburn Mile Warwick Council had said at the time, that no amount of landscaping or treescaping was going to disguise the bulkiness, size, elevation of the proposed shed in an E3 zone. Look, just in concluding, that was the first part of the submission from the applicant. But look, the second part it did upset me, because what they had written was that. Oh, is that 5 minutes over? Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Okay, no worries.
I think you got your message across very well.
Thanks very much. Okay.
We move on to another item number, 18.1, Notice of Motion, Franklin Street Proceeds of Sale, and Mr Stephen Cheers will address Council in support of the recommendation.
Oh, yeah, I'm good. Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, General Manager, councillors and staff, for the opportunity to speak. Very much appreciated. I'm speaking in support of Councillor Turlin's motion, which is to use the proceeds of Franklin Street in Mittagong to repair the Mittagong Playhouse. I'm not going to speak on point 2, which is talking about relocating the Historical Society from the building. We as we remember, objected to that lease earlier in the year, but that was defeated, and we respect the verdict. If it ever came to the point that they agreed to relocate and staff were able to negotiate, that would provide a wonderful facility, an opportunity for the theatrical and performing arts community to expand their activities. Something like Highland FM could also be incorporated, but today I just want to focus for a few minutes and convince you why using that money to fix that building is a good idea. After that objection was dismissed and the lease granted, Council did conduct consultation with the stakeholders of the Mittagong Playhouse a couple of times, and it ended in a result which was given to Council, and the stakeholders had the opportunity to speak on it the day before the Playhouse was condemned, which was ironic. There were a number of options given, and all the stakeholders agreed with option 1, which I have here, which was sharing the Mittagong Memorial Hall between the Historical Society and theatrical and performing arts groups. We had to, because there's a lease anyway, and repairing it with minimal renovations costing up to $3 million, and then the inference was at some stage we'd try and get state funding for a purpose-built building over the next few years. Went away a little bit pessimistic because where's that $3 million for renovating the building going to come from? And so we thought, well, at least, you know, we'll just keep doing what we're doing. Unfortunately, of course, the next day, the ground shifted, or maybe the roof and the walls shifted, and we had to move our show that we'd sold 1,200 tickets in one day. Now, that is just life. There's no crankiness or anything, and staff were wonderful helping us, and Chev helping us get that show on, and we very much appreciate that. But now things have changed, and we've now got a building that who knows how long is going to take to get going again. And without going into details, because I only have a couple of minutes left, there are significant economic effects for the 5 theatre groups that use it and other user groups. Us having to move that last show cost council $5 or $6 grand. It cost us $5 or $6 grand. The next show that we do it's going to add about 10 grand to our expenses. We're trying to save $100,000 to put a shed on council property, which will become council property, and that just all sets that back. And it's true for all 5 theatre groups that use that, including the youth one. Of course, in a shire that's meant to be known as an arts shire, it's also now a bit of a shame, to make an understatement, that we don't have theatre. So Councillor Turlin's suggestion that the funds of money raised in Mittagong be used on a Mittagong building makes perfect sense. Now, I fully understand that's got to go to finance and the staff have to be involved and there's a due process that needs to be taken. However, what I'm saying is that, you know, this really should be considered urgent. And if we're going to be an arts shire, we have to have a theatre. And we've already agreed that it was just going to get a light renovation. We didn't have the funds, but now theoretically we do. And I guess I just sort of summarise, and I had a lot more to say, but my 5 minutes is almost up, that, you know, if we leave that just to sit there, that fence around that building like a tombstone, everyone who drives past that, visitors or otherwise, or Mittagong residents, sees it that way. And we have thousands of people on our mailing list. We haven't written to them and complained. We're trying to play along, play with the rules. We haven't tried to mobilise the masses, right? But every time someone drives past that building, it's like a tombstone, like a grave. And, you know, we've already got the Mittagong pool issue. And, you know, do you really want Mittagong residents to just be driving past that thing, and the performing arts patrons, of which there are thousands? We sold 4,000 tickets last year. Do we really want to let that go for years? All right, so I just will finish in my last 10 seconds by saying, you know, obviously we support the motion, and I would appeal to both staff and councillors to see this as a matter of urgency, really, because it's the right thing to do. Okay, thanks very much for the chance to speak.
Thank you, Stephen. All right, well, we'll move on to the first item. Yes, we'll move on to the third item, which is the review of refused boarding house development 2 Walker Street, Bowral. And in relation to that...
no, sorry. There's no one to speak on that one, so we'll go to 9.2.
Okay. I've no one to speak on that. Well, why is it in there? If we go to 9.2 and then we'll come back to 9.1, because we have Mr. Rob Lansbury here who would like to speak to that. Are you here, Mr. Lansbury? So the item is 9.2 on page 51. Yes. Oh, sorry. Yes.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much for allowing me to talk. I'm here actually to talk to you as a local resident of Bowral in Maya Soda Street near Centennial Road, and I'm here to talk as an objector to the Waterbrook proposal Stage 2A development application that's on the agenda. First of all, I want to make it 100% clear that my objection is not because I object to seniors housing at all, nor is it because I object to Waterbrook as an organisation, and it's not because I want to argue against Waterbrook's statements that their complex will be of high quality or provide excellent facilities. I actually have no doubt that the complex will be of high quality, and I don't doubt that an ageing population requires seniors housing. My one and only contention is now and has always been that this particular development is just not suitable on the site where it's proposed, and that continues into this stage 2A development application. I've made my reasons clear on several occasions now, both in writing and verbally, most recently in my 31st of October written submission to Council regarding the current DA. That submission covered some new information regarding some fairly complex legal issues around the interpretation of the LEP and the case law that surrounds it. My allowance of 5 minutes here today is simply not enough to go through those issues in any detail and do them any justice. Instead, I'm trusting that the councillors and council staff have gone through them in detail, particularly since that new information regarding the case law came to light after the JRPP decision earlier this year. I've got my own clear view regarding the legalities around the LEP, the standard R5 zoning and the exception for seniors housing, and I also know that Waterbrook has a different view. And of course, we're both entitled to those views, and it's up to council and potentially the court to determine which is correct. All I intend to say today is this: if either councillors or council staff have any doubt at all around these particular legal points, no matter how small that doubt may be, then please take the time and trouble to seek independent legal advice. Don't simply take my word or my interpretation of how this should work. But equally, don't simply take Waterbrook's word either. To do either of those where there's any doubt or uncertainty would be to abrogate your responsibilities and to denigrate the vital decision-making role that you have, and that would be a tragedy. Because this issue is of massive importance to maintaining the Southern Highlands as the residential and tourist haven that it is and that it's always been. If we lose that, then we lose the very reason people love this area. Do we really want to risk that when simply taking some time to seek independent legal advice offers us an opportunity to avoid it? I don't believe that doing that should be of concern to anyone here involved today. I'm sure that all of us here want to be 100% sure that any proposed DA meets the requirements of protecting the integrity of the Southern Highlands. I know I do, I'm sure Council does, and I also know that even Waterbrook themselves have expressed a similar view. I want to end by saying this. I mentioned before that new information came to light after the JRPP decision earlier this year. I documented that in my submission to Council, and there is a way to take that new information into account and to modify the DA for Stage 2A so that it complies with it. There should be no simple presumption that just because Stage 1 was approved, that approval for Stage 2, as it's currently defined, should somehow follow as a matter of course. It can be modified so it complies with the new information and so that both Waterbrook and the community achieve a more suitable result for the area. I urge you as strongly as I can to take a short pause in the process, review the objections in detail, including my own, and to seek the independent legal advice suggested. If you need to, take a small amount of time to meet the objectors for clarification around the issues raised, particularly the more complicated issues in the legal space. Surely our community deserves that, and doing that is the minimum our elected representatives owe their constituents and the Southern Highlands. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, before you go, you can take questions from councillors.
Okay. Thank you.
Question, Councillor McLaughlin.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Mr Lansbury. My understanding is that with regard to the legal issues that were raised, that you engaged a solicitor to question the particular lawyer that made those statements. I was wondering if you can tell us what you got back and the money you spent to try and resolve and get him. Yeah, you might explain that to us.
Sure. At the JRPP meeting, the solicitor for Waterbrook, Mr Gadil, made a comment that everything that he said was going to be the complete truth, and this is all on record, and that he would do his best, or that he would not mislead anybody or provide incorrect information. And at that time, he presented a case called the North Sydney case that he said meant that for seniors housing, because there was a special allowance for that on this particular property, that no other provision of the LEP had to be considered by council, or by the JRPP as it was then, because of this case. And he then volunteered the information that that case had not been appealed. I subsequently found that it had been appealed, went back to him via my solicitor to try to get him to go back to the JRPP or council or whoever to say that incorrect information had been given, whether by accident or whatever, so that they actually had a chance to consider the full information, which was based on that appeal. Since then, Mr Gadil has maintained that even though that issue may have been an issue, that there may have been this appeal, he maintained that on this particular point regarding whether the R5 zoning had to be taken into account, there was no overturning of that. But I disagree with that. I believe that the appeal decided that only things that were prohibitory had to be... Sorry, is that it? Oh, okay.
Well, you can finish the sentence.
Only things that were prohibitory in the LEP were to be ignored, but since you can have seniors housing and have it in a rural setting, it was not prohibitory. So,
thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Scandra.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
Yes, Mr. Lansbury. I think in some of the correspondence you've commented on two-storey housing. Could you just make it clear to me that you don't believe there's ever been any two-storey housing in the development that's been proposed?
My understanding is that at the time, well, in fact, I know for a fact that at the time that the JRP was considering the concept plan, that the only document that had been provided by council as a recommendation had 5 times in it that there was no two-storey accommodation in the development. That was largely because stage 2B had not been fully outlined in the Waterbrook proposal. So one of the people on the JRPP asked about that. Later on, Waterbrook had to come and present that stage 2B did in fact have two-storey accommodation in it. The thing is, though, that at the time that the JRPP meeting was held, Waterbrook had the document that 5 times said that council believed that there was no two-storey, and yet Waterbrook would have known that there was two-storey because that was the only way it was going to fit in stage 2B. So in actual fact, the incorrect information was provided to the JRPP in another case regarding that as well.
You didn't quite answer my question.
Sorry.
Because I said in
Yep.
proposal to...
As is.
Yeah, well...
Oh, in stage 2A there is no...
Have you ever seen any briefing which included the two-storey?
Yes, in stage 2B.
And not before then?
Not before that, no. Pardon me, sorry if I misunderstood the question.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity.
Okay, so councillors, do you want to deal with this now?
Kevin Ryan.
Oh, Kevin Ryan, yes, who will address council in favour of the development.
Thought you'd forget me. Thank you, Council, for the opportunity. First, I'd just like to kick off on what you just heard then on the legal issues. The case that was mentioned in the JRPP, and that particular case, the particular point of law was not objected to, right? And in actual fact, the actual particular point was reinforced by the Commissioner in the Land Environment Court on the point that we targeted. We've written to the applicant, to the objector, so many times with his lawyer, spent a lot of money with my lawyer and his lawyer, right? And then it finally went away when they understood the facts of the matter, and I circulated that to council, that particular point. Thank you, Mr.
Councillors.
Anyway, we move on from that part, but I'd like to thank the council for their support on this project for many, many years. We are finally moving forward, and to the point that you've put your support behind us, you've put your support behind the residents of the Southern Highlands. With our sales going amazingly well, our sales team over there run off their feet. Well, they all couldn't be here, because one's still busy. But 76% of our purchases are locals, right? And that's a phenomenal amount. And we have one coming from the Caribbean only because their son lives here to move over here. But it's amazing on the transition, and even all our residents, they always mention, wow, what a great support from council that you've had to develop this, to allow us to stay with our custom, with our life that we've always had in the Southern Highlands, as they're ageing in the process as well. And I'd like to commend you on page 34 and 35 of your housing strategy going forward. You've recognised the fact that you need more senior housing and more targeted senior housing, because these houses are too big, and there's a lot of large homes being built in the Shire, and it's quite explicit on your target to promote those. And there are issues that that prevent senior housing from happening in the Southern Highlands, and that can be quite easily fixed with a application to the Department of Planning, also. So the report itself, I thank the council officers for their support on stage 2, and then stage 3 plans will be available sometime next year when we sit down with the council to work through those ones. And stage 2 is only single story. Right. So anyway, if you have any questions, I'll gladly take them.
Thank you very much. Questions, Councillor Nelson?
Could you just clarify the issue where there was a perceived understanding that it was single story, and yet when you presented to the JRPP it was double story? Can you explain that?
Yes, well, on stage...
Thank you,
on
Councillor Nelson.
on stage 3, in the overall master plan, which the JRPP have approved, also, they approved all 3 stages on that. And when it came back to the third stage, it's about producing a product for seniors. Just like your housing strategy that you're going to target through, you need to have a selection and a different style of product to meet that housing needs. Some of our elderly like single-story dwellings with their own villa, others like apartment-style living. So our combination is to put the both. It's only 2 stories high. 2 stories is allowable under the SEP senior living, and we've put that into an area that doesn't affect any view sites or view lines anywhere else at all.
Thank you. Councillor, who got the light on? Councillor Whipper.
So thank you, Mr Ryan. You mentioned seniors housing and you gave some accolades to council for that, but one of the issues in relation to housing is affordable housing in the Shire. Can you tell me what percentage of this development we would call affordable or socially accessible housing?
Yeah, well, it's hard to do social housing in regards to when you're producing something that is sponsored by a government department itself. But when you say affordable, ours is very affordable within the Shire itself.
Comparatively, you're saying?
Correct. And that's where some people trip up a lot when they say affordable. It's affordable in the location of where they are and our target market that we're targeting for the product that we're building. We put a lot of effort into creating these amazing facilities and the refurbishment of the old school itself on what we're doing. We recently had an open day. We expected 200 people to turn up. We had over 600 locals turn up to come through this building. 99% were amazing. First they hadn't been there before, but they were very impressed on what's happening in your local area.
So when we're talking about those seniors, for example, single women, would it be affordable for a single woman to move into these units?
Correct, and we've sold to many single women.
Okay.
Well, they've lost their partners. Some have lost their partners 5 years ago, others lost it only 6 months ago. And they're in this massive big house that they with all their memories in there, and now that we've given them an opportunity to move into something quite...
Not socially disadvantaged people, they wouldn't be a place in this development for them.
No, it's very hard. In the retirement village industry, in the retirement village industry, right, it's very hard to find a retirement village operator, right, that is going to have for socially disadvantaged people into that, because the ongoing costs that they have to pay as well. So there's a whole myriad of structure that go into it.
So I guess there'd be no place for socially disadvantaged people in a development like Waterbrook.
No, but that all depends on what pensions they're on and their financial means.
Councillor McLaughlin.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Mr Ryan. With respect, I'm going to take you back to an issue, and look, it's here on the web in writing. It's all been documented.
Question.
And the question, I'll read out the question. Just to be clear, 100% clear, at the JRPP meeting, your solicitor, Mr Gabriel, went out of his way to assure the meeting in these terms, and I'll read what he said. I'm going to speak to be mindful of my legal obligations and not to say anything that is false, misleading, and then he went on to say, it's a criminal offence for me to do so. I've got that at the forefront of my mind. I'm going to ensure that everything I say to you is completely accurate, and so that you have the correct understanding of the legal position, today in my situation. He then went on to present to the Land and Environment Court a case that was specifically, and he said, and he basically said on this that the appeal was not overturned. And yet, when you go and search this, you
Councillor
will find... No,
McLaughlin,
I'm getting
you
to the
can't
end.
do it,
I'm getting to the end, and yet it was appealed. In fact, did the
Councillor
Can I finish my question,
No,
please?
you can't, because
it's
you
a
are
question.
not.
It's a question, sir.
You are reading.
The question is, did the presentation to the JRP, was it incorrect information? Was it?
It was not incorrect information, and we've been advised of this on many, many occasions. And the lawyer did not lie. He's not in jail. He did not lie, and the matter you're talking about was not appealed. The point of law was not appealed. I don't know how many times we have to tell you, but it was not appealed, sir.
It was appealed and overturned.
No, other points were appealed. This particular point of law, and the Commissioner actually reinforced his view on this particular point.
It was overturned by a judge, sir.
It was not.
Councillor, look, there is a degree. I think you'll have to do your own research, Councillor McLaughlin, because you've got you have been told by one.
I don't believe that, sir.
Okay, you don't believe that. Then
facts are the facts.
check. Then
It was
you
overappealed.
get your facts, Councillor Scandra.
The reason I raised a point of order there before we start the clock, Mr Mayor, was that Councillor McLaughlin at a previous meeting said he was a member of the West Barrel group that were opposing this.
Councillor Scandra.
You did it on the tape,
Councillor
Councillor.
Scandra,
And
your question.
the reason I said that...
Your question.
My point of order to you, Mr Mayor, was...
there's no point of order. Your question.
You didn't allow it, but...
No, I didn't.
I have a right to speak about it.
You do not have the right to speak. Your question to Mr Ryan,
Hang on, you're
please.
wanting me to give a question, but you allowed a 3-minute diatribe
to
from Councillor
Mr.
McLaughlin, and you want me to go straight to the question. There's a sort of a difference across the room here, Mr Mayor.
You are raising another issue.
No, I'm not. It was the point of order I raised. My question to Mr Ryan, way back in the very beginning when Waterbrook started to talk to council and we did site visits and inspections and so on, was there at any time a possibility of some two-storey units being built over there pointed out to us?
There was always a possibility because the flood zone area was that particular area on that field there had not been finalised at the particular stage. A lot of it had not been finalised, and as we worked through stages 1 and 2 and to create the volume, because we need a certain amount of volume, but under the SEP Senior Living Code where you allowed 50% floor space ratio, we're less than 20% of the overall site. But it was we didn't have any firm plans on whether it was single storey or two-storey on the playing field.
The discussion was there. Yeah. And are you saying in your visitor and sales things that you're seeing a lot of older stock freed up across the Shire as a consequence of people buying into the development? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, well 100%, because we've given the opportunity now for the residents of the Southern Highlands that love this place and to be able to move, and that frees up their local stock, their own particular home, for families to move into that. Because at the moment, they're big houses and only 1 or 2 people swirling around in them, and this way brings life in those particular properties and also gives an amazing life to these residents, and they're so happy.
Councillor Turland.
Mine's an easy one. Stormwater management. How are you treating stormwater management with on-site tanks, but also possibly a huge detention tank to be reused around through the gardens and property?
Basically all of the above. We do have water quality codes we need to abide by as it flows into Minnarong Creek, but each home, we have to comply with BASICs to have water storage, which each particular home, 2,500 litres per home, which we provide in that, and that recycles in through the bathrooms and laundries.
You're not having a second system as well, just one, not one?
Oh no, we have a detention tank also, and then we use that for a lot of the bulk irrigation. We've always done that in all our developments.
Okay, so there's 2 systems.
Yeah. It's not on the list here.
Thank you. Councillor Halstead.
Yeah, Mr Ryan, following on from your comments about how popular your development is, and a lot of people are coming to you from the local area, can I assume from that you've had experience, or in fact you are experienced in seniors housing elsewhere?
Correct.
Say in the state or Australia, whatever you like?
Yeah, I know all the ones I've had before. They've been in the Southern Shire and also in the lower North Shore at Greenwich, and I produced a particular style of model that is upper end that we've designed, and we basically run them like a 5-star hotel.
Thank you. Okay, no more questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ryan.
You're welcome.
Okay, councillors, do you want to deal with this item now that we're on it? Or would you prefer to go back to item 1 and start at the beginning of the agenda?
Happy to deal with it now, sir.
Okay, then we are going to deal with this item. Councillor McLaughlin is moving as standing orders that we deal with
I'll move
item
that way, and I have a
9.2,
recommendation.
seconded by Councillor Whipper. Put it, all in favour, those against carried. We are dealing with 9.2.
I have a recommendation. You'll see up there that can be.
Do you wish for an introduction from staff, or are you happy?
I don't think we need one. Okay.
Mr. Wilton.
Through the Chair, the purpose of this report is to consider DA 171822.04, which seeks development consent for the purposes of Stage 2A of the Seniors Housing Development at 2 to 18 Centennial Road, Bowral. Councillors be aware that the broader proposal affecting the site was considered in 2019 by the Joint Regional Planning Panel as a determining authority, as the proposal had a capital investment value exceeding $30 million. The original proposal was subject to a concept development application and was later approved by way of deferred commencement for the refurbishment of the main facilities building and also the construction of seniors living development and also ancillary works on that site. The master plan concept consent is now active following the applicant satisfying the deferred commencement condition, and the current proposal seeks development consent for 28 2-, 3- and 4-bedroom dwellings on the western portion of the site. In terms of permissibility, the site is zoned R5 large lot residential, and seniors housing is permissible by way of a Schedule 1 additional permitted use identified within the LEP. The current application before Council is consistent with the master plan approved by the Joint Regional Planning Panel and further provides details in terms of the dwellings for Stage 2A. The proposal was neighbour notified for a period of 28 days, with 11 submissions being received in response to notification period, and those submissions detailed character, water infrastructure, traffic and access, matters relating to the Joint Regional Planning Panel, public access to facilities, and also setbacks from trees. Appropriate responses have been provided on pages 76 to 78 of the report this evening, and accordingly, following assessment of the proposal, Council staff have recommended approval subject to conditions.
Okay, questions, councillors? Councillor McLaughlin. Okay, Mr. Wilton, I'll give you the mic. You have it since you started. No, when I have a question, there's been comment raised in relation to accessibility from the public as well. Can you assure the public that pedestrian accessibility satisfies all requirements of council?
Through the Chair, that is correct. The accessibility to this development was considered as part of the broader proposal that was considered by the Joint Regional Planning Panel. There is accessibility provided by way of public footpaths that will produce a result which people can walk down into Bowral, and that will be considered as part of the broader overall development in terms of the civil works.
Thank you. Councillor Turler.
On the stormwater again, on page 118, the city waters put a statement in there in relation to a bioretention surface area of 150, I believe that's probably 150 square metres with another 100 square metres of page 118. Can you explain what that means?
Through the Chair, the bioretention system is basically on-site detention, which enables stormwater to be harvested on the site, and that was basically collected before it's actually then discharged into the local waterways.
But how big is it? I mean, it's only 150 square metres. It's 10 metres by 10 metres.
Through the Chair, those matters will be resolved as part of the civil works application that will come through to Council for consideration. At that time, it'll provide details in terms of the actual size and location and capacity.
Thank you. No further questions. Councillor McLaughlin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I believe my motion's up there and my recommendation. believe I've got a secondary, Councillor Whipper. Thank you, Councillor Whipper.
Secondly, Councillor Whipper. Councillor McLaughlin.
If I could just draw your attention to, this was a planning...
That's amendment. There is an amendment.
Okay, that's fine.
You can speak. That will be. I don't know the recommendation as
just
such.
up there that we defer this approval tonight, Mr. Mayor. That's what I'm
Okay,
asking
so
for.
we're going for a deferral.
Yep.
Councillor Scandra has given notice that he is moving an amendment, and that is the motion will be the amendment. Councillor McLaughlin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Back in January 18, Mr. Mayor, I put up a motion and we had a planning proposal to remove seniors living off this site. As you know, Mr. Mayor, this was taken out of our hands and the department decided that that would not happen. This was a Schedule 1. This was a spot rezoning done outside of our control. This council and our strategic planners had never ever, right going back, you've been here 20 years, they've never looked at having high density in an R5 area. That was it. But we know we can accommodate, because we have to, accommodate seniors living now in an R5 zone. That's fine. What I'm concerned about, and you've only got to look through here, Mr. Mayor, and see the flooding issues that are around this area where the access is. This is a property that's designed for seniors and people with disabilities. I do have concern about access into town. I have concern about people in wheelchairs. We know that the road that's been already done by council is only 6.7 metres wide. There is no possibility of it being as the way it is now, to have a safe pedestrian, a middle of the road concrete thing, because we know we've got trucks running down there. It is an issue. Now, maybe it can be addressed. Mr. Wilton tells us it'll have to be all redesigned and rebuilt. I don't know how people can cross that bridge, all those sorts of issues. But one of the main issues that council we could consider tonight is the R5 zoning in this area. We have to be cognizant of what our LEP actually says. And Mr. Lansbury is correct. He's absolutely correct. And I'm sure Councillor Halstead, as a planner, will say it has to be considered. Even though at the JRPP, when you sat there, they told you didn't have to consider that, throw that out. Well, we are the consent authority here, and all I'm asking for, I'm not saying throwing it out, like Mr. Lansbury, I agree we do need seniors housing, that's fine. I don't think this is the right location, but if the application was to come back in another way that addressed the R5 zoning of this land, rather than making it look like Tullumbar or something down at Albion Park, I would then probably be able to support it. But I think the people move into West Barrel and move into this shire because of the R5 zoning. It's next to a heritage zoning, a heritage property next door, one across the road. The properties around it will not look anything like what is proposed here. Okay, the first stage has gone through. They've been approved. We can't do anything about that unless we went to the Land Environment Court. And I'm not saying we're going to do that, because we haven't. So it's approved. So they'll get those 58. But overall, the amount of increase in the population of West Barrow, we know what the infrastructure's like there, we know what the crossing's like into Barrow, we spoke about it today. This is going to exacerbate that. Waterbrook can make a good development here without having it a mass, high-density development, in my opinion. So what I'm asking for to councillors is we just defer this and we can come back in February once we've had some opinion on the zoning. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Scandra. Do you have a seconder for your amendment?
Councillor.
Seconder,
Councillor Turland. Thank you.
I move Councillor Andrews.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, I'm going to speak against, in this case, the motion. I think, Councillor McLaughlin, you've missed a few meetings and you've missed a few facts on this, because, for example, I remember being briefed very carefully by the Waterbrook people on some of the features of this development, and one of them was that they were going to have community transport into town with a...
Councillor McLaughlin.
He's asking me things, so I'll just answer it.
I'm addressing my mayor, I'm sorry. There's the hand, there. Anyway, The wheelchair accessible community transport, which is going to run shuttles up into town for residents of Waterbrook. As I asked Mr. Ryan, the question was definitely raised on the site inspection and in presentations about the possibility of dual storey with living upstairs for visitors to be on part of the site. It's always been there. This fantasy that it hasn't been mentioned confounds me, because obviously a lot of our development in seniors these days does include that. I remember another proposal, I think it was out at Robertson a while back, which included one ground floor bedroom and ensuite and upstairs bedrooms for family and guests. So again, that sort of mix works. It also provides affordability, I would think, Mr. Mayor, because you're reducing the footprint of the building. The accessibility of the site keeps on coming up. The location is perfect. The location is great. If you're ambulant, you'll be able to walk straight into town. You'll be able to go under the railway across from the pool and have a fairly level walk into town. Or if you wish, you can take the walk up to the station and avail yourself of that. So I don't see the issues that are being raised there. And in terms of water management, I think that what they're doing there sounds fantastic. You can have two retention storage systems there. We've got another item up today where we're questioning that. I think we've got to, and you have to look outside, we've got to have all methods of retaining moisture for reuse in toilets and gardens and the like. So I applaud multiple systems there. So that's my address against the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Scandrett. Speakers, we're not going to have any speakers against the amendment for the motion. Councillor Whipper will speak. Councillor Turlin. Councillor Whipper.
Mr. Mayor, I rise to speak for the motion. The points that have been raised, I think, at the beginning by Mr. Lansbury, I think are worthy of taking into consideration, particularly around the interpretation of points of law. I think maybe if we do take a breath and seek some independent legal advice on that, I think that shows a responsibility, I believe, as a council, doing our due diligence and allowing and listening to the voice of the community. I draw councillors' attention to the agenda item later in the evening about our community engagement strategy, and one of those principles that we build that on is consultation with community. Well, that's what we're doing at the moment, I believe. And in doing that, I think it behooves us to actually get that independent advice and make an informed decision on this before it proceeds any further. We know the history of this site. Some of us know the history of this site more painfully than others. And like Chelsea Kumungi, it was thrust on us, and we became victims of that. And we have to rally the troops and do the best that we can for the community because of that impost on our planning projections. So in this instance, I think it does do us justice as a council to take a breath. We're not saying that it may not change anything, but I'd feel more comfortable about making an informed decision based on my conscience, rather than just feeling that we had to make a decision here tonight because it's the last meeting of the year and we're just trying to push things through. So I don't think that's good governance. So councillors, I'm asking you to take a breath, stop, and consider this, I think appropriately. No big deal.
Thank you. Councillor Turland.
Page 53 and 54, this needs to be a bit confusing. You've got stage 2 on page 53, which is, well, it's very hard to tell when you've got this level of drawing. And then on this page, it clearly says that's the stage 2 we're talking about. But this side says nearly 2, from what I can see, as best as I can read. I can't see 2A.
Yeah, you're right.
One says 2, one says 2A.
I can't even see the 2A, and I've got glasses. But
Okay, Councillor
it is confusing. Well, look, I think this does meet the needs of the community, and I think it's already gone through the gate, through the process of the JRPP. It's already gone to the point of where they've approved the staging plan, even though it's confusing on these pages. Already we've been told by the applicant that the sales are going well, which is good news for the community. I would love to see a little bit more affordable housing there, but that's not for me to call that. That's for me just to ask the question. That's been asked by Councillor Whipper, so that's not to be at this stage. Maybe somewhere around the Shire, other people will provide those goods. One thing I am concerned, and it's not in this particular DER and we can't make anything out of it, is the aged care, the physical ageing in place care. There's nothing on this particular site that accommodates that. That's a shame, but again, that's not for us to call. It's only to bring it through the process and ask the question. It's gone through the JRPP's position. It's gone through the stages, and from my understanding, for people that I've spoken to in the street, they're very happy to look at living in this particular property. And I would think that if it's true with the sales that have been told, it should be very successful and meet the needs of that. Very interesting point was brought up, and I didn't realise that it does release a lot of other houses back into the marketplace for people selling their properties, which then opens up the next gambit again for people to move in. So that's only a positive, not a negative. So I would hope to think that we don't have to have these arguments again the next time Stage 3 comes back in.
Thank you, Councillor Turlett. Councillor Markward.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I really have a question. I don't really have a clear picture at this stage. We talk about obtaining legal advice on this. I'm wondering what that would cost
so
council.
I think the question, questions can't be asked. Perhaps you asking what a clarification in the for clarification on legal opinion. What are we seeking?
I'm seeking approximate cost and time that would take to obtain, and the impact on the project per se.
Thank you. So clarification to you, Mr Wilton. Timeframes for legal opinion and costs and everything else.
Through the Chair, depending on the question that's been raised, legal advice can vary quite significantly, but anywhere between, say, $1,000 and $5,000 would be considered appropriate. Legal opinions, again, depending on the question that's asked, could take up to a week or 2 weeks.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to make you have spoken to your...
No against. I'm going to speak to my...
Okay, then Councillor Nelson, I'll give you the right before.
Just a couple of minutes. Look, originally when we did non-site inspection, I supported this concept because of the work that they're going to do to restore the existing building there of the convent, or I believe. So that will be a considerable expense to them. So it's a shame that it's got to this point, although the proponent didn't actually answer my question about the single-storey, two-storey. I think there was an issue there where there was a misunderstanding that it was going to be all single-storey, and then they came forward to the JRPP with double-storey.
Yeah, I can clarify that. When the JRPP asked that there was no heights on the second stage, that is when they clarified their position on what it would be.
What it would be.
And so the JRPP were aware at that time. I can't remember the condition that was put on though.
Right, thanks, Mr Mayor.
Okay, Councillor Scandrett. Can you please, councillors, we do have a big paper. We're on the first item and we've been going nearly an hour.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, this is, in my view, a great development. The sales are very telling. We all received information from the proponent as to the successes and the 76%. The overseas sale, that's fascinating. As I made the point, it releases a lot of, and that's been confirmed by the proponent, releasing a lot of older homes across the Shire as people seek to move into this sort of facility, downsize if you wish. So I think that's a real upside. The opportunity, Mr Chair spoke before about the need for a theatre, well, gosh, we could only just hope that the restoration of the theatre here at Ulsh might take place earlier than later, in which case we've got an alternate location. It's of ample size, I'll just mention it. But no, in terms of staging, that's part of their project. Anyway, we'll see how that goes. The heritage side of this development is good. It's, as I say, it's retaining some of the most significant parts there, including the chapel and the hall and a number of the original rooms. So I think we need to get on with this. We need the employment in this shire to take place, the activity, and we need to start this rolling ball so that other homes come onto the market and therefore liberate, maybe even afford housing.
Thank you, Councillor Scan. Before I give you the right to reply, Councillor McLaughlin, to me there has only been two issues made. That is the second story. I know three, that it be high density and legal opinion. Now, the legal opinion I feel I'm going to discount, because we have the applicant who is totally adamant that he is correct, and we have the objector who is totally adamant he is correct. So to me it's going to be up to councillors to determine whether the applicant is misleading or whether the objector hasn't got the correct information. I don't know. So I'm going to disregard that. I'm going to support the recommendation, the amendment as moved. I have not heard an argument strong enough in relation to the reasons against. There hasn't been, in my opinion, other than the legal one which is trying to be pushed. And I just can't accept that. Councillor McLaughlin.
Well, Mr Mayor, it's the LEP. It's the LEP that we live and die by. You've often said that. This is what we do in council. And our LEP says it's R5 large lot residential. I'm not asking for a refusal today. I'm asking for us to have a look. Does that, and I could ask, you know, Councillor Halstead here is an ex-planner. I could say to Councillor Halstead, I could say, do we take into consideration when something like this comes along, the zoning of the land and what the intent, we heard Mr Wilton say today, it's in R5 in a rural setting.
Can I clarify, Councillor, and you know this, it is in R5 and this development is permissible by the state government. They have given their approval.
I know, I'm not saying it's not permissible. What I'm saying is we need to get the legal advice to know that the density is correct, that they can have it as dense as that. That is what the argument is. That is what I'm saying. Do they have to take into account the density and on R5, what it's meant to be? Our planners propose R5 in a rural setting. It says it in our report. You know, that's what it actually says. So how do you maintain that sort of zoning with that density? That's all I'm asking, Council. I'm not saying throw it out. I'm just saying let's take a breath. As Councillor Whipper rightly said, let's just do ourselves a favour, make sure this is a big development. They've already got substantial commencement. They can carry on. This is not stopping anything. They can go ahead and sell houses. We've heard from Councillor Scandrett how wonderful it is they're selling all these houses. That's fantastic. Great. They can continue to do that. All I'm saying is let's take a breath, councillors, and let's make sure for our residents and our community that buy-in. Why people like Mr Lansbury moved into our shire? Why do people buy in R5? To see it downgraded to have a high density plonked right on the end of it? No, I don't think they do. Maybe we need just to take a breath. I mean, Councillor Turlin was correct too when he said basically what he would like to see is people to be age in place. You know, and Councillor is right, there's no nursing home. The first proposal we had on this many years ago was Australand, and the first thing they said they were going to have a 300-bed self-care geriatric nursing home in association with it. Now that was something that the community could go with. There's no great benefits in this for our community. This is a developer that's developing without the opportunity for people to age in place. And when Councillor Scandra talks about all the facilities that they'll be put on there, I think that's wonderful. But ask them how many they actually run today. I can tell you how many they run. They don't run any. They develop, they on-sell. So all those lovely conditions that they might say that they do, that all applies to the next owner. So councillors, just think about this, just defer it, please.
Thank you. This debate's finished. All those in favour of the motion, please, the amendment, please raise your hand. Councillors Markwart, Andrews, Turland, Scandrett and Gare. Those against? Councillors Nelson, Whipper, Halstead and McLaughlin. I declare the motion lost. The amendment now becomes the motion. All those in favour of the motion, please raise your hand. Councillors Scandrett, Turland, Nelson, Andrews, Markwart and Gare. I declare the motion, and those against, Councillors Whipper, Halstead and McLaughlin. The motion is carried 6 votes to 3. We now move back to... we still got visitor item. Well, we'll move... can I have a suspension of standing orders to deal with 9.3, please? Councillor Whipper and Markwart. Put that. All in favour. Those against? Carried. So we're dealing with 9.3, which is the subdivision of land at 278 Goldenvale Road. Mr. Jerry Hayes will address council in support of the application. Mr. Hayes? Over to you. Do you know the rules?
5 minutes.
I don't think you're going to have a huge amount of opposition on it.
So here we go. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you on this matter. While the council officer's report before you clearly supports the proposed subdivision, we urge councillors to consider the application as submitted with a 36 hectare vacant lot as a more appropriate outcome than increasing its size to 40 hectares. The approval of the 2006 subdivision of the property, creating a vacant lot of 37.8 hectares referred to in the report, actually reflects good and appropriate planning. That subdivision, like the one before you, was based on utilising existing historic fence lines and tree lane plantings so as not to impact on the amenity of the precinct, the surrounding rural landscape and the State Heritage listed Goldenvale Homestead area. As you are aware, Clause 4.6 of the LEP, exceptions to development standards, is included for the very reason to provide you, the council, with an appropriate level of flexibility to allow minor variations to development standards so as to achieve better planning outcomes than those that would be achieved if the numerical controls were strictly adhered to. The Statement of Environmental Effects submitted with our application clearly articulates that the objectives and requirements of Clause 4.6 are satisfied by the proposal. The reasons for proposing variation of the minimum lot size development standard are sound and justifiable, and in fact clearly demonstrate that strict compliance with the development standard is both unreasonable and unnecessary in the circumstances of this application. Further, we believe the application describes that there are more than sufficient environmental planning grounds to justify the minor variation to the development standard. Goldenvale has limited potential for generating income. Over the last few years, it has been operating with a substantial deficit, mostly over the $100,000 per annum mark. This is unsustainable for both the property and the National Trust. It's proposed to utilise the funds that would be produced from the sale of the vacant land in the proposed subdivision to bolster the existing endowment fund for the property. Income and expenditure projections confirm such an enlarged endowment will provide sufficient additional income for the property to ensure it can be cared for, maintained and made available for public access in the way in which the gift to the people of New South Wales and the Wingecarribee Shire was originally intended, without it being a financial imposition on the National Trust. Golden Vale was long ago reduced to a size that made it unviable as a standalone agricultural pursuit. The council report asserts approval for the application with a 36 hectare vacant lot 4 would contribute to cumulative fragmentation of rural land. We affirm that no fragmentation would be evident at all, and the impact on the surrounding environment would be no different, irrespective of the vacant lot being 36 hectares or 40 hectares. The number of resultant lots and potential dwellings and other infrastructure would be exactly the same. This is the case even if the previous 2006 subdivision were to be included in the consideration. The heritage conservation outcomes, however, would be greatly diminished if the vacant lot size were increased to 40 hectares. The area required to increase the vacant lot to 40 hectares is highlighted in blue on the plan before you on the screen. Such a boundary configuration would be a poor planning result and a very poor heritage conservation outcome. Part of Golden Vale is listed on the State Heritage Register. We understand the whole of the property is included as a heritage item on Council's LEP. The retention of the rural landscape, historic fence lines and established tree lanes must be a far more important determinant than strict numerical compliance with the LEP. A number of covenants are proposed for the property to further protect important landscape features of the area, including for the wetland area adjacent to Golden Vale Road and the tree lane plantings on the property. A heritage impact statement which supports the proposal prepared by an independent consultant was included in our application. Notably, the statement did not support the 40 hectare proposal, clearly advising that it would have a significant impact on the visual and physical curtilage of the homestead complex and associated cultural landscape. We have applied for a subdivision that is permissible under the LEP. It demonstrates careful consideration of all the requirements of the LEP, including detailed and justifiable reasoning for the application of the minor variations sought to the development standard of the minimum lot size. As you know, Council has the ability to approve the application with the proposed minor variation. The draft conditions of consent, with the exception of conditions 6 and 20, we agree are appropriate to the development. We seek your support for approval of the application, but with the amended development conditions of approval. May I finish the sentence? Removing the requirements to increase the area of the proposed vacant lot from 36 hectares to 40 hectares. That is, the removal of 6 and 20. Thank you.
Questions?
No, yes, you do have
Thank you.
questions.
Certainly.
Thanks, Mr Hayes. Look, I've got a couple of concerns here, and just a couple of questions with regard. In 2007, I believe 300 odd acres were sold off at that stage. You haven't mentioned that. There was about $1 million put aside to support this. So I don't know if there's any real argument. You get rents now and you adjust the place and you're saying that it loses money. I'm just wondering, you rent the place out, it's not open to the public. They're my concerns, sir.
If I may answer that, in 2007 we sold the lot that I referred to in 2006, that was approved in 2006. It's a 37.8 or 38.7 hectares. It was sold for about $1.2 million. It was actually part of the agreement of the deed of gift of the property, that could be done to create an endowment for the property, the income from which can be used to assist in maintaining the property. It was an agreement that was done with the benefactors of the property. Over time, that fund has been depleted. It's now valued at about $780,000, I believe, because we've had to eat into the capital of it because of the operating losses of the property over that period since it was gifted to the trust in about 2005-06.
Isn't the property still rented though, sir?
We rent 2 cottages on the property, one to a staff member and one to one to a staff member and one to a fellow who helps out with the maintenance. The main homestead itself, we're involved in a program called the Prelude Program. It's a composer in residence program that's in partnership with the Bundanon Trust and the Peggy Glanville Hicks Trust. The National Trust receives $20,000 a year for that program from a number of various funding bodies. But out of that, we still have to maintain the property, pay the gas bill, pay the electricity bill, all those sorts of things. So it's not commercially let at all, the property. It's part of a program that benefits the community, I might add, as well.
Okay,
It would be nice if it was open. It's difficult to do given the traffic and engineering considerations. We've been down that path before and it became a bit too onerous for us to do. Okay. We hope to do it more often than we have done.
Thank you. Okay, we'll have to lend it there. Oh no, Councillor Scandrett.
I will be quick. Mr Hayes, there's actually been a lot of work done to the property too, which has consumed some of those reserves. But the vision of the benefactor was to have it accessible we had an application a couple of years ago for events which was out of scale. This one is now going to work around this artist in residence and the functions related. Is that correct?
That's correct. We're working on a much more modest program of public events at the property than was proposed in 2017.
Right.
One that's linked with the Composer in Residence program, but also other activities that we can run at the property.
And in terms of the smaller lot, that makes the original curtilage of the property and the placement of various infrastructure work better. That's why you are asking for 36 hectares.
That's absolutely correct, yes.
Thank you.
We're following the historic lines of the property, the historic subdivision lines, rather than relying on numbers.
Thank you. Okay, no other questions? Again,
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Oops. Thank you very much.
Thank you, councillors. Any questions to staff? Councillor Nelson? Somebody prepared to move the recommendation?
No, I'm going to move an amendment, Mr Mayor.
Well, it won't be an amendment, it'll be the motion.
A motion, yes, okay. Thank you.
Councillor Scandrett?
And that the property be, we'll use the recommendation with the exception being that it be 36 hectares. That's condition 6, I think, has to be amended. 16 and 20. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Nelson.
Okay, Councillor Nelson.
I have an amendment to that.
Councillor McLaughlin. So we have a motion. You can speak to the motion in a minute. Councillor McLaughlin.
Yeah,
your
look,
motion.
my amendment will just be that there'd be an 88E, and I don't know if you want to include that into yours. Okay, well, can I quickly speak to it?
Okay, so your amendment is the motion with the addition
of an 88E.
88E
yeah.
instrument be placed over both properties, one property.
Well, I think both properties. I think they should be both properties. They're both heritage listed. Huh?
The heritage,
No,
you
I think
can't
it
have
should
it on
be.
the land. I don't think you can have an 88E on vacant land.
I'll only agree to it over the actual property.
Yeah, over the Golden Vale property, so there's no more
Right.
subdivisions, right?
Yes,
Happy?
yes,
I'll speak
yes.
to
So
it?
that's that's the amendment. Do you wish to speak to your motion?
No, it's going into the
first?
recommendation.
It's in the recommendation.
He's happy to accept it.
Okay. Well, so what are you doing? Withdrawing?
No, it's my motion.
So wait a minute. You're not moving an amendment.
Well, I was, but he's accepted it into
But
his
you are now
recommendation.
accepting his amendment into your motion. Yes. Right. Well,
You're
that's
happy for me to speak to it?
it's the water's starting to get clearer.
Councillor Turnbull just wants a question.
Oh, well, I'll
We can move on.
Councillor Turland.
The simple question, well, maybe two, but the first one is it going to set a precedent because we're now under the 40 hectares and we're going to 36? I understand that, but I'm just asking. I'm not asking.
Okay, the question is, does 36 hectares set a precedent?
Through the Chair, as always, these applications are dealt with on their merits. There is a clause 4.6 which gives an instrument to enable the lot to be undersized.
No, it's... I didn't hear you muttering away there. Councillor Mr Wilton?
At the end of the day, there is no precedent. Each application is dealt with on its merits.
And I can't see the problem with the
What is this?
with
what is
the
88
with the with the 88 with the recommendation.
That's what it was, about no more subdivision.
Well, that's what an 88E does. That it
what
be
I thought.
subject with an 40. Let's have a look.
I'd like to speak to this too, because I've got a few concerns.
Yes, I know. Councillor Scandrett, you have the mic. It was your motion.
Welcome. Thank you. Look, I think it speaks there. We've got the support of, I look at all councillors on this. This is an important property, Mr Mayor. I think it's important that it gets moved forward, and it is an important part of our landscape in the Sutton Forest area, which is, I think, another point to be made. But let's move on this. The National Trust has a significant investment in this shire, and I think it's great that we can give them this support.
Thank you. Councillor McLaughlin.
Yeah, look, it's just, I'll be quick. It's about, and while we've got Mr Hayes here, really to say, we'd like to see restoration of these properties. They are valuable in our shire, and we have seen, and I understand the position of wanting to get money to preserve these things, but surely if the land is adjusted and you've got rents coming in and what have you, you know, they haven't invoked the heritage clause here to do something, but I'd like to think in the future there'd be an opportunity for some restoration of these properties because of this particular property. And as he said, it'd be nice to see it open more generally to the public for that. So look, I'll support it today. But our Heritage Advisor, I would have liked this to have come to our Heritage Committee. Unfortunately, we didn't get that opportunity, and that's why I took the opportunity to ask those questions, because that's what would have come up in our Heritage Committee with regard to, you know, how many times you slice the cheese. It's been cut off before, it's cut off again. People donate this land in perpetuity going forward, thinking that that's how it's going to be. And what happens? It gets sliced off. So hopefully this is the end of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Nothing like a quick wrap up. Councillor Turland.
Look, I've got a question, well not a question, a statement here, and I want to make sure that you guys might follow me in this. Is the money that's going to be raised from this goes where? Into what bank account? Heads off to Sydney, used all around the state. How do we lock this money into this property to keep this one at its level that we should? We've missed that at this point. Fairfax did. Fairfax, when we did the subdivision, said he's going to put a certain amount of money aside to keep the old building going. Are we going to miss that here or not?
That's going to be a rhetorical question. I know the applicant is propelling to end, but it had to be asked.
Well, no, number 3 could be put in there that the money.
Okay, well...
Number 3 could be added in there with the move in a second, that the money raised from this should be...
you can't do that.
Yeah, is it
you
going to
can
stay here, or we
request...
put it off to...
excuse me.
I'm the one who had the floor.
Right, we're finished. Councillor Scandrett, you can put in that the monies raised be request. You can't say they must. Well, then that will be up to the mover and the seconder. No, thank you. The answer is no. Is there any more debate? Then I put the recommendation. It's a planning matter. You've all got everybody's got a show of hands. All in favour of the recommendation, please raise your hands. Carried unanimously. Right. We now move on to 9.4. Oh, we go back to... Thank you, Councillor...
We're still on visitor items. 9.4 is a visitor item.
Well, do you want to deal now? Do you want to keep going and deal with 9.4? We haven't dealt with, but we have people to speak here on the items, that's all. So happy to move suspension of standing order to deal with 9.4, secondly Councillor Nelson. Put it, all in favour, those against, carried. So we have in relation to 9. Terry Hams to come forward to support the development.
Thank you for the opportunity to address the council. My name's Terry Hams. I work for JMD Development Consultants. I'm acting for the developer on this matter. Just a brief introduction. I'm a civil engineer. I've been responsible for all the design of the water quality and quantity measures on the Renwick development at Mittagong. And I was acting on behalf of our client Landcom on that matter. So I'm fairly well versed in the matters of stormwater in the locality. I've been involved in this project for about 5 years now, and we've been heavily involved in the design of the road and drainage systems on the property. In 2004 there was an original application issued with a condition requiring the provision of individual rainwater tanks, 4,500 litres per unit. With 106 units, that's about 477,000 litres of storage to be provided. In 2014 there was a modification to the consent, and as part of that the engineers at the time, ACOR, proposed an alternative system which was agreed to by Council and the New South Wales Water, where in lieu of those individual tanks they would include a single large storage tank, 522,000 litres in volume, which would collect the water off not only the roofs but the roads and everything, with that water being reticulated back to the houses in a formal reticulation system. That has been incorporated into the dwellings that have been built already, and at the time of the consideration of 2014, I believe there was a simple oversight where the original condition should have been removed in consideration of the additional capacity system, storage system proposed by ACOR. I note that with the 106 units, 4,500 litres per unit, it's about 477,000 litres. The replacement system actually increases that to 522,000 litres, so there's an additional 45,000 litres of storage used on the site. And that is in isolation from the stormwater quantity basins that have been installed on the property. There are 2 detention basins which restrict the outflow from the site to protect the downstream drainage, and there is also a rain garden in the rear catchment to protect the bushland to the north of the site. This application is not a means of reducing the capacity, it's just a means of correcting an oversight that didn't get addressed in the original application to modify the consent in 2014. Our developers are not trying to move away from their responsibilities to ensure reuse of water, and in fact they've increased the 522,000 litres, a substantial increase over the individual 4,500 litre tanks. The residents will be using recycled water from this large tank without even thinking about it. Every time they turn on their washing machine, every time they flush the toilet, the water is being reticulated through a dual water system. There is potable water for drinking water being reticulated through the estate, and there is a recycled water system being reticulated through the estate, and that's being plumbed automatically straight in by the developer into the toilets, washing machines and the taps in for around the yard watering irrigation. It won't be a matter of a resident having to go out and turn on the tap on his water tank. It will just be plumbed, it's plumbed into the houses automatically, and it will be happening without the residents even knowing about it. The 522,000 litre tank represents an increase in 45,000 litres. And we're not just recycling water off the roofs, we're recycling water off the roads and the roofs and the yards, everything. I believe it is an excellent system they're proposing, and I hope the council can see clear to the requested modification.
Okay, thank you. Questions?
Yes.
Councillor McLaughlin.
Just wondering, sir, how the rain garden you mentioned,
Yes.
I wonder how we put in place some sort of contingency so that that'll be maintained, because the problem we have with rain gardens, they sound fine.
Question?
The question is, how will that be maintained in perpetuity? Do we need to put an 88E on it, or what's your suggestion?
The whole property needs to be maintained. The residents lease their houses, and there's a property management that has to look after the whole property. There's maintenance of all the gardens, the public areas, all the public is in inverted commas, and the rain garden forms part of that.
And it'll be regularly maintained?
Regularly maintained, the same as all the gardens in the area, and the grass and footpaths.
Councillor Turner.
The filter off the 522,000 litre concrete tank, I imagine it'll be concrete, it's going to have a huge filter on it.
Correct.
But I would assume that the 4,500 tanks, the litre tanks, the small ones, would have no filter. It would just go straight into the system of a pump. It'd have to be a pump because it can't be.
Yeah, there have to be a pump on it. That's right. Yes.
Yeah, it's got to be a pump.
Yep.
Yeah, I've got it. But the filter will give the quality of
Yes.
the water to come back up.
Yep.
To service the units.
Yeah, and it's also being used in the non-potable. It's not to the drinking water taps, it's to the toilets and washing machines.
Yeah, it's good. Got it.
Yep.
Thank you. Councillors. Councillor Mark Ward.
Very much, Mr Mayor. Mr Hams, are you familiar with the term the tragedy of the commons? It's an economic term talking about sharing resources. Is that familiar to you?
Not really, no.
Okay, I'll speak to that during the debate. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Scandrett.
Mr Hams, if we were to leave the smaller tanks plus commission the concrete tank, we would have 999,000 litres of water, which would be used for non-potable purposes, because the concrete tank, we know some of that water is going to come from hard surfaces as well as from roof. Am I correct with that calculation? It would be nearly 1 million litres in storage across the site.
There would, but there would be less water going into the 522,000 litre tank because you're diverting it before it gets a chance to get there.
Well,
until we get 5 inches of rain.
I concur with that, but we did flesh out that there is a lot of the hard surfaces are diverting into the concrete tank, so it's got its own source, even if the roof water is going to the 4,500 litre tanks. What happens with the 4,500 litre tanks if they are full and it rains heavily? Do they overflow, or do they divert into the system down to the concrete tank?
In a heavy rainstorm, the gutters will overflow onto the ground, and they'll
so
go
it'll
into
make
the
its way down
stormwater
the
system.
concrete tank.
Yeah,
Thank
the
you.
stormwater system's been designed
Yes.
to carry for everything.
So it'll get to the concrete tank.
Thank
you.
Thank you. No further questions. Thank you very much.
Thanks for your time.
We are dealing with this one, so
I'm going to...
Councillor Scandrett.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to propose that the motion be not change the determination. In other words, leave it as it is.
Seconded, Councillor Mark Ward, that the approvals or the DA application be refused.
Question to staff, if I can, please.
Councillor Turland's question.
Just ask the question in relation to the water, in relation to Waterbrook. Their tanks are only 2,500 litre and their detention system is only 100 square metres. It seems excessive that Councillor Scandrett would want $1 million litres.
No, the question.
The question is, both done in Sydney Water, how can they be so far apart?
Mr Wilton, through you, Acting General Manager.
Through the Chair, in terms of the actual quantum of storage that's provided on the site is basically been prescribed by not only hydraulic reports that have been submitted with the application, but also Water New South Wales requirements. Basically, this what is proposed is basically following the Water New South Wales requirements in the original application.
One last question, if I can. Excuse me.
Yes, you can have one.
We give an occupation certificate in relation to this of the first sets of units when we didn't provide the tanks because of the 2,000 litre was in the amendment by New South Wales Water.
Mr. Wilton.
Through the Chair, Council wasn't the prescribed certifying authority for a principal certifying authority for the original occupation certificate, so I unfortunately I can't answer that question.
Next question.
Councillor,
I'm moving the original recommendation. If I have a second.
Okay, so we have, it will be a direct negative, so you'll have to have it as a notice.
No, mine got up first, sorry. Mine.
No.
Sorry.
Councillor Scandrett moved, the recommendation is that it be approved, be refused. You're moving it be approved, that is a direct negative. You will have to do it up.
I thought I got in first, actually.
No, you didn't.
All right, then.
Tape will show.
Okay, so you spoke, but you didn't move an amendment. Are we finished?
I think I have to give some reasons, Mr Mayor.
You don't, you just have to say be refused, but if you wish to give reasons that, if there is objections, fair enough. Councillor Scandrett.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The reasons, it's not water-wise, it's not consistent with the Council's general strategy, general water strategy. It's not consistent with the Council's current situation in terms of conserving water. Fourth, it was originally consulted on the basis of this system.
That it was.
That
so
it was.
I'll just tell you, Ms Richardson, all recommendations should start with that.
And that it would be inappropriate for us to set this precedent at this critical time. I'm happy to have any other comments, councillors.
Okay, lights on. Councillor
I
Nelson.
think we move a foreshadowed motion, don't we? Which is the
well,
recommendation.
I'll let the motion go up, and that will be subject to this motion being defeated.
I'll speak against this, Mr Mayor. I mean, how many properties would we like to see to have dual water systems? We'd love to have that in most of our buildings. I'd love to have that so that you could just turn a tap on. I mean, to ask people, and as we heard from the consultant earlier, to have to go out and turn a tap on to get your, the bit of water you've caught off, this is already supplied, pumped, through your washing machine, through your toilet, all those things. A massive amount of water, as Councillor Turlin has alluded to. This was put in place, I think it was an oversight, as Mr Wilton said, that we weren't the complying officer, we weren't the consent authority or something when this went through. So that's how it got missed. I think the double dip on this is asking a bit much when a lot of developments go through without even putting secondary water through. These people have gone to the trouble of having this plumbed in all the way through so people have access to it straight away, to water their gardens, to wash, to do also wash their cars, what have you. I think it's a big impost to ask someone to then say, oh yes, we'll have tanks as well. This is your little bit of water. Well, it's all been collected, and as we heard, if you're going to double dip and have tanks, you're sucking water out of what was going down into the large pondage anyway.
Councillor Nelson. Councillor Whipper.
Thank you. Look, I rise to support the motion. Councillors, on page 152, we have a number of reasons why we refused this development previously. There have been no changes in the application as far as I can see. We're being asked yet again to review the same decision that we made, and I think in the interest of consistency on page 152, if councillors look at those reasons, I think they're still quite applicable.
Council, well, you're going to have your right of... Oh, no, you need to speak. Yes, Councillor Markward.
Thank you very much, Mr Chairman. I'm speaking in favour of the motion, of course. I referred to a term called the tragedy of the commons, which basically explains why if you have a shared resource, basically it's in your interest to use as much as possible. Now, if you have individual tanks and that person uses too much water, they will run out. They will therefore behave differently and use less water. If you have a shared resource, you say bugger it. Oh, sorry, that was an apology. You basically say, I've got plenty of water in the big tank, I can keep on using that. So in terms of giving feedback to users and changing their behaviour, I think it's important that they are aware and get the feedback if they use too much water or if they use little. So I think that's a key point. They must have separate tanks or be billed for using the larger tank, but I don't recommend that. Thank you.
Thank you. Council Nelson?
No.
Councillor Turlin?
2006, 4,500 litres was put in the DA. At that stage, no thought was made on the big tank. Sydney Water didn't make any commitment to a big tank back in 2006. It was probably Sydney Catchment Zone back then. We've got Waterbrook that's only providing 2,500 litre with a detention system of 100 square metres, 10 metres by 10 metres. This guy's putting in, and it's only 150 millimetres from what I can read. That's the latest development that's just gone through the process. This one doesn't have to do such an extraordinary amount of water, double in the sense of the small tanks on either side, and the detention system is minute, absolutely minute. You're talking now 1 million litres of water to be stored. Calculation, it'll never be used. And what you've got, the problem you're going to face now, look at the logic of it. Does the water come out of the tank into the rooms, or does it come out of the big tank into the rooms? Why both?
To the chair.
Does it make sense? What's going to happen? We're going to have a 455 variation come in to remove the 522,000 litre tank. That'll be the next thing that'll come in. And because you can't have both, you can have one. You've got the same development, in theory, nearly the same size, with 2,500 litre tanks with a minute detention system, and you're wanting this bloke or this company to go to extraordinary lengths to correct a 2006, 2014 and 2019 change in Sydney, New South Wales waters. I don't get it. You guys obviously don't get it. When you lost it in July, you didn't get it. You don't get it now. If this goes to the court, look at the logic of it. 1 million litres of water. Are we going to waste our money in the court on a 455 because of 206 DA? It does not make sense. So what are we going to make every developer now? We've missed Waterbrook. They've got away with half the size tanks on the side of the building. What about the other guys? I mean, it's extraordinary. I can't believe it. But I guess if it comes down to the Mayor's casting vote, that'll be very interesting. And then we go to court, and then we waste more money. I just can't see it. Or 455 variation comes in, and you'll be fighting it back again on a 522,000 litre tank, taking that out, which is what Sydney Water suggested, New South Wales suggested. I'll let you, I know it's going. Mayor's casting the vote.
Okay. I'm going to support that it be refused.
I figured that.
And I'm surprised that somebody who voted for a climate change emergency wouldn't be.
Oh no, look, that is not. You are out of control. You're the one that voted against the climate change. This is 1 million litres of water.
Thank you, Councillor Turland. Councillor
is?
Turland, I have the microphone. I have the right to speak. And you said it will be interesting how the Mayor uses his casting vote.
Again.
I make the point that this development to this point of time, unless I'm wrong, has water tanks. There is water tanks on them.
On the 16th.
So the people who have purchased have been aware of the water tanks. I don't see a big impost. We have a Shire-wide requirement for all houses to have water tanks. And there was, and Councillor Whip will remember this, there was a heck of a debate. How dare council make new residences have water tanks? Well, we are in a situation where there's going to be a lot of people who are quite pleased to have that water tank. And Councillor Markward makes a very good point. Some people can waste water. And if they have the right to use that water as much as they want, and they may very well waste water. I see no problem with two systems. I'm on tank water. I have been all my life. And if I could have backup tank or a backup storage, I would be very much appreciative of it. So this development has been built with tanks in place. The people who move in and the residents haven't been built, the new residences, so I can't see the issue because the purchaser, there's a tank with the residents and you have a secondary tank, and the same with Waterbrook. The only thing I agree with you, Councillor Turlin, and I think you've raised the point, that perhaps we review our policy in relation to water storage with the knowledge that there is a push for a climate emergency, and as such we might have to have areas of revisiting some of our policies. So I'll agree with you there. But I have my right, and I do accept the fact that there is a climate change, and you may very well be wrong. That water may very well be needed and used at another time. So I'll support the recommendation as moved by Councillor Scandrett, and it's not against the developer. It is, I think, for a bit of common sense and sensibility that at some stage that water doesn't go off. It can always be used, and I hope it doesn't have to be, but it is part of the development. People buy a house, there's a tank. Councillor Andrews. Oh, you're having your right to reply, Councillor Andrews.
If I can, thank you, Mr Mayor. This is obviously going one way. I'll just very, very briefly, everything that Councillor Turlin stated, and he did it very well, was 100%, well, it can't be 100%, but in my opinion, 95% accurate, very accurate. And if we listen to Mr Hams, the engineer, and listen to him closely, you would understand how accurate it was. I don't believe it we're going this way, but that's the way it's going. So thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Scandrett.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It's only 10,000 litres per residence. Keeping the two systems means we're just doubling their capacity roughly. I think in these times, and it's going to get very difficult, and I was only speaking this morning to councillors about our people in our villages who are on tank water, who are running out, farmers who are running out, myself included. The Mayor is on tank water. We're all very aware of the situation out there, and here's an opportunity to make sure we've got water security in its own way. This lessens demand on town water because of the the combined system. I actually agree with you, Mr Mayor. I think we should revisit our policy on this. I think we should do that in the new year, because we might have to consider, in fact, encouraging our citizens to have water-wise infrastructure on their properties. That might involve more tanking and so on, so that they maximise all moisture use and reuse. So, councillors, I think this is where we need to go, and I think we need to send a message to all developers, and Councillor Turland, I do think that that is something we'll probably ask the staff to take up with Waterbrook as the plan unfolds there to increase their storage for each unit and for the site. I think it's subject to final. Anyway, it's staged, as you know.
So I put the recommendation, moved by Councillor Scandrett, seconded by Councillor Markward. All in favour, please raise your hand. Councillors Scandrett, Nelson, Whipper, Markward and Gare. I declare the motion. And those against? Councillors Turland, Andrews and McLaughlin. I declare the motion carried. And I just wish to advise members of the public, Council will be going immediately to level 2 water restrictions next week.
Back to 9.1.
And we now move back to 9.1. Um, 9.1, review of refused boarding house development 2 Walker Street, Bowral. Move Councillor Councillor Turland, seconded Councillor McLaughlin. Have we got any discussion? Put it. All in favour, say aye. Please raise show of hands. It's a DA. Yeah. Carried unanimously. Things happen, Councillor. Sometimes councillors make decisions, and I've looked at it, and I've looked back 10 years later, and I've thought, council made that right decision. And a former councillor made the comment to me, you might get defeated, but usually the right answer has got popped up. Tender for the Civic Centre refurbishment, 11.1. Thank you, Councillor Nelson. Are you moving one? Secondly, Councillor Scandrett. The recommendation is tender for the Civic Centre refurbishment, and the recommendation that in relation to the report concerning Civic Centre refurbishment, Council adopts the recommendation contained in the closed Council report. So I put that. All in favour? Carried unanimously. I'll now ask the GM to read out the recommendation.
And the recommendation which councillors have now adopted in relation to the tender for the Civic Centre refurbishment is that council accept the tender from Matrix Group Company Private Limited at a lump sum of $6,799,000 inclusive of GST to undertake the Civic Centre refurbishment.
Thank you. So we now move to 11.3. and that is tender for construction of stormwater drainage at Hilltop, New South Wales. I moved from 11.1 to 2. My fault. Tender for biosolids removal, transport and beneficial reuse. Councillors Whipper and Markward. Is there any discussion on it?
Is there interclosed or?
Yeah, so you're moving one, yes. So is there any discussion on it? So before I put it, that it is the council adopts the recommendation contained within the closed council report. I put it. All in favour. Those against, carried. I'll ask the GM to read the recommendation just adopted.
And the recommendation adopted is that council accepts the tender from Arkwood Pty Limited at the submitted schedule of rates to undertake biosolids removal, transport and beneficial reuse for an initial period of 2 years, with a further provision of 2 times 1 year extension options to be exercised at council's discretion for a total contract term of 4 years.
Thank you. Now we move to 11.3, tender for construction of stormwater drainage at Hilltop. Move seconded Councillor Nelson, moving 1. And the recommendation is that the council adopts the recommendation contained within the closed report. I'll ask the GM to read that motion we've just passed.
Have councillors voted on it?
I put it all in favour? Yes, we have now. Carried.
That council accepts the tender from Stefanuti Construction at a lump sum of $286,948.20, inclusive of GST, to undertake tender for the construction of stormwater drainage in Hilltop.
Thank you. We now move on to 11.4, Widgecarribee Shire Road Maintenance Policy, page 219. Do you want to have yes, very briefly, Mr. Paul.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the report before you this evening is in relation to a draft road maintenance policy which Council considered at its meeting on the 26th of June earlier this year. That draft road maintenance policy has been put out on exhibition for a period of 28 days. Council received 8 submissions and they're detailed in an attachment to the report and the responses from the council officers. Briefly, what this will do if council adopts this tonight is it will rescind our unmaintained roads policy and replace that with a Shire roads maintenance policy. The roads maintenance policy, I guess, is a change in direction in terms of how we deal with our lower order roads. The new roads maintenance policy creates a hierarchy of roads. And what it does is that those roads and there's about 129 kilometres of them that have not been properly formed or built. In the past, we've taken the view that they're not part of our fixed assets and we weren't maintaining them. The position going forward is slightly different. What it's saying is that they are lower order roads that haven't been properly formed. What we will do is, based on a risk assessment approach, we'll go out and assess them from time to time in terms of whether they provide safe access. If they don't, we'll consider what action we will take in terms of potentially doing some rectification works or maintenance on those roads, based on that road hierarchy and also based on council's capacity through its budget.
Thank you. You've heard the introduction. Are there any questions? Then I'd like somebody to move the recommendation. Nelson and McLaughlin. Any discussion? Put it. All in favour? Those against? Carried. 11.5, page 234. Proposed road closure of Part Road Reserve, Nicholson Street, Berrima.
Questions?
Question, Councillor Markward.
Thank you very much. A question for staff. I'm hoping staff can give me some figure or quantitative number on the value of actually progressing this proposal here. What's the benefit in dollars for the community and such like? Thank you.
Benefit to the community, Mr. Pepping? Oh no, Mr. Paul. I'm sorry.
Look, through you, Mr. Mayor, the honest truth is the benefit to the community is actually negligible. The benefit is to the adjoining landowner. They're going to get the benefit of this unformed road if council agrees to close it. There's no financial return to council because it's an unformed Crown road. Any funds that come for the sale of that road when it's closed go back to the Crown. So there's not really a great benefit to the community at all.
Councillors, have a recommendation? Councillor Nelson? Second to Councillor Turlin. Yes, with the comment, it's not the applicant's fault. We might just have to have another review next year. Perhaps you'd be writing these down that we look at our review of the charges that are made in relation to the value of the land reserve. So I put it. All in favour? Those against? Carried. 11.6, application to be appointed as reserve trust manager of various Crown reserves being cemeteries within the Shire. Councillors Scandrett, seconded Councillor Halstead. Is there any discussion on it? Put it. All in favour. Those against? Carried. 11.7, page 242, extension of licensed area for car park to Bundanoons Community Association, Bundanoon Men's Shed. Moved councillor
Yeah, I'd be happy to move
Scandrett and seconded.
My one voter in Bundanoon.
That was you. You were on the booze, weren't you?
No, I wasn't.
Councillor Nelson. You've got your light on, Councillor Nelson.
Oh, no, that...
Only to have a...
yeah, we've got a seconder, haven't we?
No, Councillor Scandrett moved it. You're seconding it.
No, this is pretty good, Mr Mayor, for Bundanoon. There are 3 groups using one facility. They need some car parking. It's all pretty straightforward.
Thank you. Put it. All in favour. Those against. Carried. Page 246.
No, before we go into that, Barry would like to ask you to move the matter of urgency.
Okay, we have a request that we have an item to be dealt with as a matter of urgency in relation to Mr Paul.
Through you, Mr Mayor. Councillors, you've got before you there a supplementary report, 11.8, which relates to the Station Street upgrade project. Councillors had a briefing this morning on a number of issues, and there is a matter that I need to, I guess, speak to Council in closed committee, and we're seeking, as a matter of urgency, that this matter be dealt with, and it be dealt with in closed committee.
Okay, Councillors Halstead and seconded Councillor Andrews has moved it be a matter of urgency. So is there any discussion? Councillor Halstead moved it, Councillor Andrews seconded it. Councillor Scandrett.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr Mayor. Well, you know I'm going to stand up on this, but I want to just go to the heart of
Are you speaking, why is it a matter of urgency? That's the only thing that can be debated.
I'm actually going to make a point about the confidentiality of it, Mr Mayor, because it says here, as it contains commercial information of a confidential nature that would, if disclosed, prejudice the commercial position of the person who supplied it.
Okay, that's the question.
Could I have an explanation from the General
that's a fair
Manager
enough
as to
question.
who we're in competition with here?
Thank you. That's a fair enough question, and I permit.
Yeah, Mr Paul.
Councillors, the issue that is of commercial importance, I guess, is that there are land dealings involved here between council and other parties, both ways, and that's something which, in my view, requires to be discussed in closed committee.
Okay, and it'll be determined by councillors when they vote whether they agree or disagree. So I put the recommendation. All in favour, please raise your hands. Councillors, all councillors save Councillor Scandrett is voting for it. Well, it's carried unanimously. I'm going to ask for a show of hands again. All in favour of the recommendation that it go into closed. Go into closed, carried all but for Councillor Scandrett, who is voting against it, and requesting his vote be recorded. We may move to page 246. Development applications determined, moved by Councillors Andrew and Nelson. Is there any comment? Then I put it. All in favour? Against? Carried. Councillors Andrews and Nelson. We move to 12.2, development applications received from 29th of October to 24th of December. Move Councillors Turland and Markward. Councillor Turland.
Yeah, just one thing. It would seem that DAs that have been lodged and approved, there's been 4 dual occupancies in the last month, and in this month, in front of us, there's 3. That's 7 in such a short period of time. I imagine we've got all these precedents now being set all around the Shire.
Thank you, Councillor Turland. I'm not sure what you were alluding to, but I'll take it. I'll take a guess. Councillor Nelson.
Yeah,
no, you
just,
can't come back to the comment.
Move an amendment,
Get
Mr
a bit
Mayor.
of a ho 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 atmosphere here yet. Councillor Nelson.
Just move an amendment. It's as is there 1, 2, 3, except item 52 is deleted.
With exception, so it be moved with the exception of what item?
52 on page 260.
And that is
That's a wrong one. No, it's not there. Sorry.
Okay, so
Not there, so it doesn't matter. So I'll withdraw.
so who moved the recommendation?
Councillor Toland and Councillor Markwart.
Right. So that's been moved as printed.
As amended on the screen.
33 is not there, which is coming back anyway. It should be ticked.
It's already ticked in the report.
33.
On page 258.
So you want item, just to get it right, item 52, 58, 65 and 75. And the following item, item 12, come to council. So you've got 2 in a weekly circular, 4 in a weekly circular and 1 to come to council. Councillors clear on that. Councillor Nelson.
Yeah, well, my amendment is to exclude number 33, which is ticked. So it can be done under delegation by council.
Well, it would be.
Under delegation
That
by
will
the-
be done by delegation. No, it's not.
No, it's not.
Okay, so you want the number 33 be excluded and be
Yep.
dealt with by council.
I'll second that.
That's an amendment, so...
Okay, so...
Yeah, I know, it's
let-
contentious. Yeah.
Excuse me, councillors. We now have a motion moved by councillors Turland and Markwart that that motion be adopted. Councillor Nelson is moving all of that with the exception that item number 33 be dealt with under delegated authority. That's the development in Orchard Street. So that's what I wanted to clarify. So Councillor Turland is withdrawing his support as the mover of the motion, were you, or the seconder?
The original motion.
Yeah, so he is now removing his support. So we'll now need a motion to accept the information
With Collarvale in it.
with Collarvale in it.
Me, and I'm sure I've got a councillor across
It's
here.
already in it here.
No, you said you're out.
No, in the original motion, it's ticked to come in.
Yes,
The boys have moved it.
so it goes out. So you're withdrawing your support and Councillor Scandrett is looking for a seconder
To keep
to get
Collarvale in. Councillor Whipper.
Councillor Whipper. Now, Councillor Nelson is moving an amendment that as the above be the amendment with the exception that item number 33 be dealt with under delegated authority. So Councillor Nelson moved it and was seconded by Councillor Andrews. Right. So everybody's clear. So now, somebody to speak on the recommendation, or you just want to put it?
Can we go up, because the motion now doesn't have a mover.
Yes, it does.
Yes, it does. It was Councillor Scandrett, seconded by Councillor Whipper. Right. So now we go into debate. Councillor Andrews.
I could be, I may well be wrong.
Councillors?
I may be out of order here, Mr Mayor, but can I seek a point of clarification if maybe staff can explain why this development's coming back?
Okay,
After being
so the
approved?
clarification is, why is item number 3A, which is a
33,
DA that was approved by council in Orchard Street in Cola Vale for a 2 units, is coming back? Mr Wilton. Senior housing, whatever.
Through the Chair, a development application's been lodged in relation to a seniors housing development at 2 Orchard Street, Collarvale, on the basis that a Class 4 proceedings have been lodged in the Land Environment Court relating to notification processes and other matters relating to that DA. Council's lawyers have given us advice that they believe that there's no issue, but to remove any doubt whatsoever, the applicant has decided, in order to avoid costs to all parties, to relodge an application, have it re-notified, and obviously have it dealt with on that basis.
Yes. Thanks, Mr Mayor. So that's the reason why I'm proposing that it be excluded, because it's the same application that was submitted before and approved by council. There was a bit of an issue about it was advertised over Christmas time, and there was issues with the dates being the public holidays. So he didn't want to expend the money to go to court, which is understandable, and that saves both parties. So he's automatically relodged the same application. So I don't see there's any need for it to come to council. It can be done under delegation.
Councillor Turland, Mandrews, sorry.
Just to add to that, if I may, Mr Mayor, that, just make it very clear that it was through no fault of the applicant that this is coming back to us through the notification, the problem with the notification. I just want to make it clear that it wasn't necessarily his initial problem.
Thank you. Councillor Turland.
Yeah, it's not the applicant's fault, and I would imagine council's actually the first defendant in this, because they're the ones that are accused of not advertising through a process long enough to comply, even though the building has been approved by council itself in its form. So the defendant is number one, is council, I would assume, because they're the ones that's been challenged in relation to the timing of the advertisement. We can't ask questions, but I would assume that's the case, because the applicant's done nothing wrong. He's lodged the DA, he's done the process, council have gone through and did what they meant to do, and the technical issue was it wasn't long enough. And so that's how I see it. So I'm very happy to support the two boys' motion.
Council, we are in debate whether it's the amendment or the motion.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd just like to say that my name magically disappeared there, but that's by the way, it's not important. I do believe it should come back to council because it is quite a controversial decision. So I think it's best to have it in full open council. Councillors can say their two bobs worth, and the public can see justice being done. Thank you.
Thank you. And before it goes to the vote, my feeling is I'll support the recommendation that it, or the amendment moved by Councillor Nelson. Look, it's a technicality. It is not a building issue. And I just find to say that it was not advertised adequately when there was a petition of virtually supposedly a public meeting was called, everybody in Colo Vale was advised. I don't believe that there is one resident in Colo Vale who can't say they didn't know about the DA. Council approved it, and yes, if it went to court, the judge would say, well, there is that technicality. So they've done the right thing and lodged a new DA. So I'll be supporting the amendment. So I now put the motion. All in favour of the you don't want to write a reply, do you? Okay. All in favour of the motion, please. The amendment, please raise your hand. Councillors Turland, Nelson, Andrews and Gare. Those against? Councillors Scandrett, Whipper, Halstead, Markwart and McLaughlin. I declare the motion, the amendment lost. I now put the motion. All in favour. All in favour, the same way. Same way. Thank you. So we're now to modification application 12.3. Moved Barrel proposed changes, 10 dwelling houses, 13 Clark Street, Barrel. Happy enough to move it, Councillor McLaughlin, seconded by Councillor Markwart. Is there any discussion on it? We did an inspection. It's pretty straightforward. Put it, all in favour. Those against, carry. Oh, it's a planning matter, so everybody show of hands. Carried unanimously. We move to 12.4. Councillor Scandrett is leaving the room. Okay, it's moved Councillor Turlin, seconded Councillor McLaughlin. Is there any discussion?
Just one. I'd like to know from staff, if we can,
Just so the public is aware, this is for an application, a building application review requested by a councillor at 144 Mount Broughton Road, Wirrai, who has just left the chamber. Councillor Turlin.
there's been some issues in relation to access to the property. Do we know that access at this time was granted, as it wasn't the last time?
Through the Chair, Council staff arranged an independent consultant to undertake the assessment of this DA. There was no access required to the property. It's simply a review of determination as done by a desktop review.
Google Earth is fantastic.
Thank you. Any further? Councillor Nelson.
Yeah, Mr Mayor, look, the staff have provided 5 reasons to refuse the application. Reading through the responses there of the applicant, I noticed a number of issues raised, and then the objector spoke tonight and refuted those reasons for refusal, particularly the one where it was suggested that he wouldn't construct the dwelling, and that there was issues about actual commencement. They seem to be disproved. So having regard to those, the size of the shed being viewed at the front, I mean, it's more than 10%. I mean, we use that 10% variation. It's greater than 10%. It's closer to the road. So there's all those reasons. So unfortunately, I'll have to vote with the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. Councillor Andrews.
Yeah, I see no option, Mr Mayor. I'm surprised and probably disappointed as well, as the application's come back without any changes from the last time when it was refused. So due to that, it's quite easy to refuse.
Thank you. Councillor McLaughlin.
Yes, Mr Mayor. Look, I think when someone in a councillor's position knows what the DCP is and knows what the rules are, I mean, it just flies in the face of and then to the assertions that he made about his neighbour, I just think didn't do himself any good at all with regard to that. So no, I'm happy to support this. I think the right decision has been made here.
Thank you. And just to let the community know, this has been independently peer reviewed by 2 separate councils, and both have come up with the same sorry, not a. Well, it's still been reviewed by external parties, both coming up with the same recommendation. Put the recommendation. All in favour? It's a planning matter. Please show of hands. Carried unanimously. We move to 12.5, Wingecarribee Local Housing Strategy. And Councillor Whipper, you have the light and an introduction first, please. Thank you, Michael. Yes, away you go.
Through the Chair. Thank you, councillors, and I'll try and keep this brief, but there is a lot to get through. Councillors, I am happy to present the draft Wingecarribee Local Housing Strategy, which aims to provide a long-term planning framework for housing in the Shire, and it will guide the decisions of council, the private sector and our community in delivering new living areas and a greater diversity of housing to meet the needs of our community both now and into the future. So by way of background, councillors, the Wingecarribee Local Planning Strategy was adopted by Council in 2015 and conditionally endorsed by the Department. In conditionally endorsing the Wingecarribee Local Planning Strategy, the Department did not endorse Chapter 4, the housing component of the strategy, as it relied solely on infill development to meet our housing needs. So the Department at the time recommended that Council prepare a housing strategy that identifies new greenfield development areas to provide a range of housing opportunities to meet our housing needs. So councillors, my team, with the help of our assets and our GIS team, have worked tirelessly to finalise this housing strategy in accordance with the advice of the Department and the recommendations of council, and we believe that this strategy provides not only a housing stock that will meet the needs of our community, it will provide certainty to our community about the location of new development. It will provide certainty to council and the development industry. It will allow council to make informed investment decisions about the provision of infrastructure, and it will help build confidence in the decision-making processes of the council. So the strategy includes detailed information about our changing demographics, which highlight a clear disconnect between our housing needs and our current housing stock, and it aims to better plan for housing to ensure it's reflective of the needs of our community. So the strategy has 3 key planning priorities for the Shire. Firstly, to promote infill development and facilitate a greater mix of housing types, to provide a greater mix of price points in the market and facilitate an increase in social and community and housing, and provide for well-planned new release areas and ensure that our communities are supported by essential infrastructure. So each of the planning priorities has a set of actions and performance indicators, and the performance indicators will allow us to continue to measure the success of the strategy, and where we're not meeting our housing needs, we'll be able to continuously review the strategy and our planning framework to ensure that over the long term we're meeting the needs of our community. We also identify 6 new living areas across the Shire that are proposed to be staged over a 30-plus year period, and these new living areas were identified through an objective, evidence-based process that looked at the constraints of the land. It looked at a multi-criteria suitability analysis based on sound planning principles. We looked at the provision of infrastructure. We looked at visual impact assessments to give the council and the community confidence in the future growth of our Shire. Look, it is very much a bold housing strategy, but it's one that is based on a sound evidence base to give both council and confidence and the community confidence. The report, councillors, seeks endorsement to start the community exhibition process, where the recommendation is for a 3-month consultation period to ensure that all of our community has the time to provide meaningful input into this important planning process for the Shire.
Thank you, and before you take questions, I'd like to commend you for the 5-point strategy is not easy to put together, and I think the effort you've put into it, it will obviously cause debate, as we all know when we do different strategies, but just to let you know, the council appreciates the amount of effort that has gone into this. Councillors will also make comment, so I open it up, and Councillor Whipper.
So these are questions first, Mr Mayor. I'm just flagging that I'd like to move a motion as well. Yep. Thank you. So through you, Madam GM, to the staff, Council are also in the process of putting together a local strategic planning strategy, what we call a local character statements. I'm just wondering why we haven't established what those character statements are prior to going out with a housing strategy.
Mr Park.
Thank you, and through the Chair. Councillors, there's 2 reasons. Firstly, because the Council resolved for us to prepare a housing strategy and bring it back before Council by December, hence why it's come up to this meeting. The second reason, and a very good reason, is that we currently do not have an endorsed housing strategy, and while we don't have an endorsed housing strategy, it leaves us vulnerable to spot rezonings, to speculative development proposals, and ultimately for the development industry to be guiding how our Shire is going to grow. The intent of the housing strategy is that it will give council and the community the opportunity to provide a long-term plan for housing so that our community can have confidence and certainty about how our Shire is going to grow. It is a critical component of the local strategic planning statement. So the local strategic planning statement, as you would be aware, councillors, will inform every rezoning decision that happens into the future, and I wouldn't be confident putting that up without a sound evidence base about how we're going to deliver housing into the future, and that's what this strategy achieves.
Yes, I remember the debate fairly clearly when council said we do want this before Christmas. Council has it, you have delivered, and any more questions, Councillor Weaver? No, you're right, Councillor Turner.
Yeah, thank you very much. On page 318, I think is what you're reinforcing, is that our motion of 114 back on the 24th of July 2019 said that we had to have this planning strategy by December, which is what you've done. We've got it in front of us. But it also means that that motion back there that was put by, moved by Councillor Whipper and Councillor Andrews, basically said we would take no more spot rezonings until this was been produced.
That's right.
We are now at the point of if we don't approve this tonight, people could bring spot rezonings in. That's the question.
Mr. Park.
Thank you, and through the chair, look, quickly, yes. I guess the answer is yes. Council resolved not to accept any more until December. We are now at December. Anyone is within their rights to lodge a planning proposal to rezone land as of tomorrow onwards.
I'll second it.
Okay, so, well, Councillor Whipper has indicated a motion.
No,
I don't know whether it's this
amendment
one.
or a motion?
A motion?
Is it? That's
A
different.
motion, so... No, he's not flagging that he's moving the recommendation, he's flagged that he's moving a motion.
Well, it's okay.
So
I'll move
you
the
will be
recommendation.
flagging that you will be moving an amendment.
The
Well,
recommendation will be
depending,
amendment.
let's see what Councillor Whipper is going to move to see whether it's in negative. You're in negative territory. Councillor Whipper. Oh, unless other councillors have a question.
Yes.
Question. Councillor Scandra.
One is a clarification, that is, could the 6 proposed areas of investigation be discussed in seriatim tonight? Is there any reason that couldn't be done?
Oh, we are at a council meeting, not a briefing session.
Yeah, but just asking.
Well, it can be.
Yeah, thank you.
But depending on...
I mean, they're listed there on page 51 in the attachments, if you're looking for them, the 6 of them, everyone.
I don't think tonight is the time...
No, but procedurally it's possible. Okay.
Yeah, it is procedurally possible.
So
I would
motion
like
might
to
come
hear
up.
your question.
Okay, my question...
On, say, question 1.
Okay, my question was in relation to the recommendation. For example, we say public information kiosks throughout the Shire. What is your definition, through you, Madam GM, of a kiosk? Is that a briefing?
Okay, you've asked the question. You've asked the GM. What you've... Councillor Scandra, you have asked the question to the GM.
Well, you cut me off, Mr Mayor. I just want to ask, is it a interactive forum?
I get the gist of the question, so I'm happy to answer it.
Thank you.
It will be, it'll be staff at a venue who will be available to engage with people who may wish to come and ask questions or provide feedback.
It's a non-formal thing. It's not a public meeting.
No, it's not a public meeting.
It's a walk-in, walk-out.
Yeah.
Right. And is there a possibility that we could, in fact, have sessions like at Robertson, where people could sit down, hear the presentation, and then people could come up to a microphone and speak? Yes, the answer is surely.
Well, I think
not necessarily.
We would like to just see where we go with this, and I think a lot of value is obtained by less formal forums where people can come, not necessarily feeling intimidated by a large crowd, and ask their individual questions.
So the answer is yes, it could be. And
Yes,
the
it
public
could be.
engagement strategy, which we're about to adopt later on, probably goes to the very heart of that. That's my question.
Thank you, Councillor Scandra. Right. I get exhausted hearing you with your questions sometimes. Councillor Whipper.
So my motion, Mr Mayor, would read that Council defer the release of the Wingecarribee Local Housing Strategy pending a councillor information session and consultation early in 2020.
Second to Councillor Markwart, move Councillor Whipper. We are now in debate. Councillor Turlin is flagging an amendment that the motion is the amendment. I need a seconder for the amendment. Councillor Andrews. Councillor Whipper.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I will
And I
try
might
to keep...
foreshadow motion as well from the chair?
Well, I will
as a
try to keep
suggestion?
the e-motion out of this, Mr Mayor. My concern with this is the process. I don't want to break it down. I do live in a village that's nominated for one of those land release areas. I don't want to do this in seriatim because I don't want to make it about this village and that village. What I want to do is question the process. I was very clearly under the impression, even given that we were bringing this housing strategy back to the meeting of December, that we would, at least in tandem, be running our local character statement process as well and involving the community in the consultative process. That hasn't happened. My concern is that what we're doing by releasing a housing strategy and identifying, earmarking areas for land release, that we're setting expectations up in the minds of the community. I think that's critically dangerous. And I don't think it's taking taking the most out of the opportunity that the Department of Planning have given us. We know one of the constraints to planning in this area currently is the fact that it's a generic state template. You know, whether you build in Balmain or, you know, Bowral, it doesn't matter. Everything is just assessed under the same planning template. This is our opportunity, probably our one and only for 30 years, to actually identify what it is we want. Now, we went out to a customer satisfaction survey. What's one of the main concerns of this community? Overdevelopment, loss of lifestyle, loss of open space. Why don't we incorporate those priorities and principles in our local character statements and build a housing strategy around that? This is what we're elected for, councillors, to listen to the community and to make those decisions. Now, I understand that the staff are bound by certain procedures, but my God, we're the policymakers here, this council. And I think that we're here to represent community and we've got our ears to the ground and we hear what the community wants. The last thing we want is division in the community. This came up the other night at the local demographics and housing committee as well, and they endorsed the same feeling. Why would we put out a housing strategy when we haven't developed a local character statement? We also had a motion on the books for the demographics and housing committee to meet monthly to workshop this. My God, that never happened. They never had any input into that either. So I get the feeling, and I'm sure there's people in the community as well, that get the feeling that we're being just maybe, no, I won't use the word manipulated, but certainly pushed along. This is what we want to avoid. This is what gets us into trouble all the time. So the other thing that was raised at the...
Thank you, Councillor.
I'll remember that for my right of reply. I'll remember.
Councillor Webber, as you sit down, would you consider adding the word that until that review is taken, that no spot rezonings be permitted?
Bingo. Yeah, exactly. Yep. Put it in there.
Council...
Would anyone like to speak against?
Yes, anybody speaking against? Councillor Nelson.
Yeah, I'm speaking against. Look, the staff have been given an instruction, moved by Councillor Whipper and seconded by Councillor Andrews, way back. We've been sitting on this for 3 years to get this done, and this is going to help stop the spot rezoning applications so we can move forward. It was prepared on an analytical process using specific criteria that the staff did it. They've worked on this from the direction from council. It's going to give the community a say. It's not going to split the community. It's going to go on exhibition for 3 months. If we defer this is a valid point. If we defer this, we don't come back to February, and then it goes out. Then we've got to have an information session. Then it's got to come back to council. Then it's got to go out in 3 months. So even 2 months. You see how it pushes everything back in the planning process. So, and this 3-month provision will give the community a say, and then it can come back and be considered. And I can't understand why the identification of criteria, what did you say, Councillor Whipper, the village criteria? The local character. Couldn't we have an information session on what that actually means and where we're going with that? I sympathise with Councillor Whipper on that and the villages, but I think we need to get this process moving now.
Councillor Markward.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd just like to reiterate that council's asked for this report and we've got it. The fact some of us don't like it, including myself a little bit, reflects a bit on councillors. Council did a sterling job. I've read the report, it's quite thorough, based on facts, but I am concerned it sets some unrealistic expectations out there, or maybe not popular or not good expectations. That's my concern, not the document. The document is a good document. I think it's well thought out. We do need more housing diversity and we need more housing stock in the Shire. Whether you agree with that or not, the population pressure is on, the state government is driving this way, we must meet that in some way. My main concern is basically that the villages could turn into towns by stealth if we're not careful. I would like to see somewhere in the strategy or discussions, this village will become a town or not. Let's keep that separation between villages and towns, and I just want to make sure that's in place. So I will support the deferment, so we can get a better handle on this, and so all councils can have a say. If it goes straight to the community now, without good, strong council support, I think we're going to struggle. I think we have to have a close to unanimous or majority strong council feel that this document is the way we want to go. Otherwise, we're going to get into trouble. So I will be supporting Larry's motion here. Thank you.
Councillor Turland.
It's going out for 3 months, and the community will have the say in each of the areas, I imagine, in right through all the villages that are, well, there's only 2 villages in relation to this here anyway. If you look at page 365, 367, there's your kiosks. It's already there in our next motion that's coming forward, community engagement. So the council staff will be going out as similar as it shows here with Mr Pepping and 365, and he'll be talking to all these people in through the Shire. And as for the character statements, the character statements come into play after this, because the community will have their say. But as we were told in our briefing session, each one of those things, these planning proposals, have to go through a lot of hurdles, and the hurdles will be the type of housing, the colour of the roof, the 88E instruments that you've learnt now, and 88B instruments that we didn't apply on Fairfax. So all these things will come back to play, and it's when the developer, each of them lodge their systems, that's when council will have the input to actually manipulate or change or address all the issues that you brought up in our planning, in our briefing session. So this is not building 3-storey homes in Robertson. As we found out, the minimum size lot of Robertson is 2,000 square metres. 1,000 square metres? It is 2,000 square metres.
Yes.
I thought that's what was told, 2,000 square metres. So we've got 140 odd, and we're basically talking about Robertson, for God's sake. Everybody has to take a bit of load off the Shire. Well, I'm not quite sure what you're talking about. I know where I'm talking about. So we need housing stock right through the Shire. It'd be lovely to have younger families move further out to the villages and not just be stuck in town. And you've got to spread the load over the whole Shire. 17 villages, 3 major towns. We're told we have to do this. Now, if we don't approve it here, there possibly could be spot rezonings have been put on the shelf since July last year. We're not going to accept them. Not going to accept them. If this doesn't move forward, I'd imagine next week you'll get a few planning proposals you're going to have to deal with.
The recommendation says that we still not accept.
Well, maybe. Not the second one, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. It's in the amendment. Councillor Andrews.
You want to go first?
Councillor Scandrett.
Oh, I've been upgraded. There you go. Look, I think there is an order of things here to be discussed, and we've got the community engagement strategy next. And in many ways, I think the community might want us to engage more than just a kiosk with coffee and lamingtons, because I've got a feeling they want to ask some hard questions. In fact, I've got a thought, councillors, and that is that maybe as we go forward on this process, we might have to do a survey on some of these proposed housing locations, the 6 of them, in those communities, because I think that they will be very interested in these. Councillor Mark Ward, I think you're also quite right. Where do we chop? He's back as fresh as ever. Yeah, you know, you say at what point does a village start to go onto its journey to be a town? How do we encourage that or not encourage that as the case? I guess those are the thoughts. And I think there's a lot of people out there who are going to say, hang on, you didn't talk to us about that journey and whatever, going from to being a little village, a little rural village, to making us into a town with resultant services. Maybe they want to tell us that they do want the services or they don't want the services, or the neighbourhood shops or the extra facilities. So, Councillor Whipper, I'm going to support your motion, and I'm glad you've added that extra bit there to just push off any spot rezonings until we get back to this. But I do want to say one thing. I think we will need to have a really robust engagement with the community, and that might involve some market research, just on the basis of what we've just seen with the review of our community engagement process. In fact, that's the review we got shown last week. It's the one that counts towards the GM's annual review. So, and quite high on it was development, transport, traffic, and consultation. Consultation was right up there.
Thank you, Councillor Scandrett. Councillor Andrews.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I recall on the 24th of July, the meeting where our Councillor Whipper and my motion was to have this this study, you know, hopefully prior to Christmas. And I remember Mr Pepping saying that it was, you know, sort of unreasonable. It was pushing it, but they would make every effort to produce that document before Christmas, and they've done that. I see no problem with this document, and I think it deserves to go forward now, not be deferred and put back, because it will go back to beyond April. We're kidding ourselves, we think it'll come back before April, because it won't. In my opinion, it deserves to go forward now, probably primarily because of the work and the extent and the professionalism of the production that's in that document. 3 months it goes on exhibition. Surely we'll get the right feedback. And then, you know, we're not approving anything at the moment. By going to the community for 3 months, if there's genuine objection, it'll come back, whether it be 5 or 55. I implore you, this document deserves to go forward now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Councillor Nelson.
Just objecting to the motion, speaking for the amendment, or the other way around. I was last time.
You're speaking
I just want to read out here in page 327, I won't be too long, Mr Mayor. The local housing strategy will provide certainty to the community in relation to the location and future residential living area, and will facilitate informed investment decisions for both council and the development industry. The housing strategy will also inform future infrastructure planning and investment decisions by council, state government agencies and service providers. So that's where we're headed. Now, if we delay this and go to an information session, you can see where we're going. Even if we go 2 months, all of a sudden you're pushing into July, August, elections in September. This will go to the next council. So, you know, let's get on with it.
Yeah. Thank you, councillors. Before Councillor Whipper has his right of reply, I could go either way on this, and I agree with Councillor Whipper and Mark Ward in relation to consultation with councils, that we asked for it, we got it. Be careful what you wish for. And that's a commendation to the staff, because I think it was my idea that we put a ban on spot rezonings until we do this, and then it formulated into the motion. I'm going to say that we put it out. I'll be using my, that's where I'll be voting. as long as, and I would like the staff to put this into the diary, that our first briefing session of 2020 be on the local housing strategy. I think it gives will give councillors a good overview, and I can understand Councillor Whipper's comment, and that is it is a big document. It has taken a lot of work, and normally we get a total understanding of where it's going as it goes out. But Councillor Whipper and Andrews, Councillor Nelson, Andrews, Turlin, they've all said it. If it doesn't go out, it's 3 months from today, and it probably wouldn't go out until next week, which will be the 20th, or around about the 20th, and then it's 3 months from there. Mid-May. Right.
Sorry, mid-January.
Mid-January. So, unless you want to come back for a special meeting on it, no, I don't see any enthusiasm. We are right. Okay, I have that in. Yes, thank you. So it will not start until mid-January. Is that correct? It will not go out until mid-January. So the February, I'll go with my recommendation. I'll support that. We'll go out, I'll be voting that we go out now. We can still have the briefing, council can still get their head around it and take the community consultation when it comes back. Councillor Whipper.
My God, Councillor Turlin, we might be told what we have to do. I didn't think you responded to that sort of bullying. This is what it is. It's about bullying from state government. When have we decided just to roll over and take a kicking? Really? When? I mean, here we are doing catch-up with Waterbrook, you know, with Chelsea Kamungi, all just dumped on us. Here's an opportunity, councillors, for us to actually say what's important to us. We're saying, no, we don't want to do this. I'm asking for 2 extra weeks, councillors, so we can have an information session. Now, I've been around long enough to know what the community expects from us. They don't always get it, but I've been around long enough, and so have other councillors. We need to include the community in this. We need to listen to our 2031, our plan for 2031. We need to take out those character principles and make those statements of them. That's what we need to do. And then develop a housing strategy around that. Everybody's happy. Who's this benefiting now? People that are out there looking for opportunity and already grinding their knives. I mean, we've all started to get the emails, haven't we? The speculators, the people that have been hammering on council's doors for 20 years saying, I want this developed. Oh, if you're going to develop this bit of land, why not develop this bit as well? Every time we've done a review of the local LEP, council laws have been involved in that. They've workshopped it. What happened in this instance? A report is made, put up to council. The briefing session last week, we're informed about it, not included in that report that's coming to council, and we're told that it's coming. Too late, sorry, done. That's never happened in my time on council. Council laws have always been involved in those workshopping processes and consulted. I think this is a bit offensive, really. The other thing that came up at Demographics Housing Committee meeting the other night was the fact that there were concerns around information kiosks. And councillors, when I look at our strategy that's coming up shortly, there's a spectrum. The first is to inform. To inform, provide the public with a balanced and objective information to assist them in understanding the problem, or in this case, why we're doing this. The next step is consultation, to actually hear their concerns. Now, when we brought this up at the Demographics Housing Committee and suggested that rather than information kiosks, we had consultation kiosks, My God, hey? It's like taking a pork chop out in a synagogue. My God, don't do that. We can't do that. We can't put in consultation in the vernacular. So what is this all about, councillors? Why don't we take a breath? That's all we're saying. 2 weeks, my goodness. It's going on for 3 months. We know that. But we also know that it's not going out till mid-January. 2 weeks, councillors. Let's defer it. Let's get it right and include councillors.
Okay, we have a recommendation. The motion moved by councillor... Can we go down, please? Moved by councillor Whipper and seconded by councillor Markward. All in favour of the recommendation? The amendment, there it is, thank you. Amendment moved by councillor Turlin, seconded by councillor Andrews. All in favour of the amendment, please raise your hand. Those against?
Planning matter, you need to...
So
It's a planning matter.
it's a planning matter, so we've got 3 in favour. Councillor Turlin.
The amendment.
The amendment. Are those in favour? I'll start again. Those in favour of the motion? Amendment. Those in favour of the amendment, sorry. No, I won't. I'll leave that. I'll leave that.
Call them out. It's a planning matter.
Councillors Turland, Nelson and Andrews. Those against the amendment? The balance, which is councillors Scandrett, Whipper, Halstead, Markward, McLaughlin and Gare. So the amendment is lost. I now put the motion. All in favour of the motion, voting the same way. So that will be recorded. Those against, same way. .6 planning proposal. 12.6 planning proposal development standards for strata and community title subdivision dual occupancy. Councillors wanted information on this.
I'll move it.
Thank you. Through the Chair, councillors, this report pertains to a planning proposal that was recently exhibited. The planning proposal sought to introduce to amend 2 clauses in our LEP with the intent of ensuring that the minimum lot size provisions prevail for community and strata title subdivisions in the E2 and E3 zones, just to close a potential loophole within our LEP. The second part of the planning proposal relates to the exempt and complying code development set, which will allow dual occupancy and medium density development to be undertaken as complying development. We're introducing provisions into our LEP that will control the lot size for dual occupancies to ensure that the code set doesn't undermine our existing planning controls.
Right, so it's moved by councillors Turlin, seconded councillor Andrews. I'll put that. All in favour? Carried a show of hands, please. It's got to be recorded. Councillor Turlin? Carried unanimously. And just in relation to the housing strategy, I'm asking that it go on the first business paper of February. Right.
This is a briefing session for it.
Yeah. But no, the briefing session will be the first Wednesday that February that we meet, and the business paper, it will be on the business paper of the first meeting of February after the briefing session.
So the same document.
Yes.
Well, we'll see.
May not necessarily be the same report.
Well, that'll be up to the briefing session. It goes on to the agenda, and then it'll be up to council. Right. And you convinced me, Councillor Whipper, you did very well.
You swung 3 times, you did very well.
12.8. The tender outcome electronic document record management system. 12.7. 3. Adoption of Wingecarribee Animal Shelter Alternatives for Euthanasia Policy. Move Councillor McLaughlin, seconded Councillor Scandrett. Do you wish to speak?
No, happy
Then
to.
please turn your light.
Yep.
Then we'll put it all in favour, against, carried. Now we're on 12.8, tender outcome, electronic document record management system. So there is a recommendation that council adopts the recommendation within the closed council report, moving which number? One. Councillors Markwart and Scandrett. Put it, all in favour. Those against, I'll ask the General Manager to read out the document that we've just adopted.
And the recommendation that has just been adopted is that Council reject all tenders for the electronic document record management system due to all submissions insufficiently addressing the key specifications in relation to system integration outlined within the tender scope. 2, that in accordance with clauses 178(3)(e) and 178(4)(a) and (b) of the Local Government General Regulation 2005, Council enter into negotiations with Technology One Limited with a view to entering into a contract in relation to the electronic document and records management system, as the vendor addressed all other required functionality during the tender process, and that a further report be presented to a future meeting of Council at the conclusion of the negotiations.
Thank you. So we're now on to 12.9, request for a refund of development application fees by Southern Highlands Artisan Collective. Move councillors
Mr
Whipper.
Mayor, can we do this to 12.9 and 12.10 in series?
We can, which is request for refund of development fees by Hilltop Men's Shed.
Yeah,
I'm
be
suggesting in seriatim. Councillors Whipper's moving that be in seriatim. All in favour? No, seconded Councillor Markwart. All in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Against? Carried.
Okay, Mr Mayor.
So you're moving items 12.
That we provide a refund of the full costs for both those applications.
Okay, so
seriatim is
seriatim. They've been moved in seriatim.
Yeah.
Oh, we're doing them one by one. On block. Thank you.
So on block is what we're.
Now I put it all in favour.
All right.
Against, carried.
The en bloc motion would be.
Councillor Markwart.
Yeah, 100%.
Sorry, I used the seriatim.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. So it's been moved by Councillors Whipper and Markwart again. Put it, all in favour. Those against, carried. We're now over to 12.11, post-exhibition report on community engagement strategy, page 357. Move Councillor Scandrett, seconded Councillor Turland. Any discussion? Put it.
Is the QRs going to have copies there too? What type of copy is it?
I put it, all in favour. Those against, carried. We move over to 13.1, exclusion of notice of motion from business paper 27 November. Move Councillor Nelson, the report be noted. Seconded by Councillor Markwart. Any discussion? Put it. You got discussion? Councillor Turland?
Well, I don't believe they were unlawful, because both of them are actually back in the system again now, just by changing 2 words. I wasn't given the opportunity to have the discussion to change a few words. And I remember the one in relation to asking the General Manager to give a 15-minute presentation, and that was thrown out. This one.
You're on page 377.
I am.
Okay, you can say that's fine. So you're just disagreeing?
I'm disagreeing.
Right.
As I said, I brought them back in just by changing a few words in them, and we didn't have to have the argument and the dissenting motion against you, and then you use your casting vote. That shouldn't have gone that way. the courtesy should have come back to us as councillors who put motions in to
Well-
alter a few things to make them work, but no, we weren't given that opportunity.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I also had this issue raised with me on a matter at a previous meeting arising from our engagement workshop out at Craigieburn. And there was never any opportunity given to me to fine-tune that motion so that it would have been acceptable. So I would like to suggest that we do revisit these, Madam GM. Now, you can do that in a collaborative way. You can sit down with any councillors that have had put up motions in the last month and had them refused by you under your provisions. No, seriously, look, if it's only 2 words, mine was similar too. I just wanted a record of the discussions at Craigieburn on one matter, right, put out there, and it was refused. So I'm really concerned about this, that elected councillors, like all of us, put up a reasonable motion that, in my case, the presentation on the Playhouse be released to the public. There it is. No, there it is. That's what it was.
Thank you, councillors.
It's a public matter. It's a motion I put up on a proper form, and it was refused.
Thank you.
No, Madam GM, you can't speak to this, I don't think.
Excuse me.
Well, I'm speaking for 5 minutes.
No, I would like you to sit down. You cannot keep interrupting, councillor. No, you had the floor. You said you cannot speak, Madam General Manager. I'm sorry, that is a directive you gave, and
Mr. Mayor, your memory.
Thank you. Now, the GM would like to make a comment because you made inference.
No, I would just like to suggest to councillors that if you want to put in a notice of motion, you might actually like to consult with the staff before you submit it so we can provide you with the right wording, rather than receive 7, 8, whatever number of notices of motion in close to the end of the business day on a Monday. I'm just suggesting that you might like to work with us collaboratively.
I suggest you might like to work with us.
Okay,
I would be delighted.
I think there would.
Before the Friday, a list of things of what I expected them to be in the system. I get a letter.
Point of order.
Excuse me, councillor.
This is not to the topic.
This is not. You're right, councillor Markwart. I have seen notice of motion. I have seen how they've been submitted, and they are very, very, very unprofessional on some occasions. And I suggest that councillors who submit notices of motion do their homework, get it typed out, get it correct, get the wording right that you're trying to get, and then council staff can process it. It is no good hammering staff when it's your own fault.
Disagree with you.
Excuse me, I have the microphone. I believe I
Yes,
have the
you
microphone.
do.
Subject to the chairman.
You have the right.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to make the point that very few councillors have this problem. It seems to be limited to 1 or 2 councillors, so which indicates that they are doing something different to the rest of us. I would suggest to the councillors that have this difficulty, speak to other more experienced councillors and find out the way to do it. Thank you.
Well, I don't have to speak to any. I've been here long enough, I understand the system. The duty of care was quite simple. I wrote a document. I sent it in. I expected to come back, and on the Thursday, the day before it was printed, I get an email saying, we won't allow this one and this one. Not on the Tuesday, not on the Wednesday, the Thursday. And then we get into a system here where you overrule the motion because it went through the system. It was out of order. Because the General Manager's not in a contract? Come on, give us a break.
Thank you, Councillor Turland. We are discussing a not individual item. I'm put the motion as being moved by Councillor Nelson and Markwart. Put it all in favour. Aye. Against. Carried. Against. Okay.
The two in the room.
15.1.
Well, we're here.
climate emergency, the petition relating to climate emergency be received and noted. Moved Councillor McLaughlin, seconded Councillor Whipper. Put it, Councillor Scandrett. You wouldn't think it was the last meeting of council. Councillor Scandrett.
Mr Mayor, I'm sorry.
You gazumped me moving this way, Councillor.
Councillor Whipper.
Yeah, Mr Mayor, I just wanted to flag that, and I note the report, and I also note that a rescission motion was defeated on the floor of this council almost 3 months ago. So I'm just flagging that that climate emergency motion will be coming back early in the new year. There is also in the Environment Sustainability Committee minutes a recommendation from the committee that council, and that recommendation from the Environment Committee, I'll say it now so I won't have to say it later, is that council recognises the latest climate change science from the IPCC and acknowledges that the Wingecarribee region is vulnerable to the impacts of climate change, such as heat waves, bushfires, severe storms and changes in rainfall. So that is a recommendation. It was explained to the members of the committee, the processes of decision and the timing around when those motions can come back. But as I am on my feet and there is an opportunity to say something...
You never miss an
I
opportunity.
never miss an opportunity, Mr Mayor. In the Southern Highland News on the 6th of the 12th there was an article and it is headed Climate Change Impact on Mental Health. Now I did raise that United Nations, the World Health Organisation previously when I debated this, and I think the Australian Medical Association, I'm not sure, I'd have to check that, are also raising concerns about the impacts of climate change on the mental health of particularly young people. Put simply, eco-anxiety is a specific form of anxiety relating to stress or distress caused by environmental changes and our knowledge of them. There is no specific diagnosis, but self-reported presentations include panic attacks, insomnia, obsessive thinking and/or appetite changes caused by environmental concerns. I can attest to that. Working with Reframe, a youth mental health program, we recently had a celebration of 1 year of providing those services. We had a poetry competition and 80% of the young people that read poetry focused on environment and the impact that we're having on the environment and their concerns around climate change. So when that rescission motion comes back, there'll be more opportunity to raise some of those issues. So I'm just flagging that, Mr Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Whipper. Councillor Mark Ward.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Being away for the last few months, I haven't had much of a chance to speak about climate change, although I did write a letter to the paper recently, and I think I had a bit of a crack at someone, which was a bit unkind of me. But I just want to flag something that perhaps isn't recognised in some of the documents we generally see. CO2, which is the main greenhouse gas, lasts in the atmosphere 20 or 30 years. So what we're experiencing today is what we did 20 or 30 years ago when we were all a lot younger. What we do today is impacting the next 20 or 30 years. Not tomorrow, but 20 or 30 years. That should scare everybody in the room. And how we address that, I don't know. But I'm scared.
Thank you. Yes, the one thing I will say that since this debate commenced, and Councillor Mark Ward has sent me a fair bit of material, and his comment just then that when we're 30 years older, and I won't be here, none of us probably will be on this side of the room, maybe on the back side of the room, will be knowing what it's all about. And I don't know whether 35 years hence is going to be a very nice place. If we move on to, I put the recommendation, put it all in favour, carried. Minutes of Traffic Committee, moved by Councillors Halstead.
Moved by...
Yeah, that was it.
No, that was
climate change.
Children's services.
Oh, so they were stuck together. The petition relating to children's services be received and noted. Moved by Councillor McLaughlin, seconded by Councillor Scandrett.
Moved.
I'll reverse the mover and seconder there, please. Is there any discussion? Go on.
I think we should be very mindful of the number of people that have put pen to paper in the light of normal petitions. That's a fairly big number. I mean, I know it's not like the 3,000 that was threatened and we never saw. Get the message, Mr Mayor, on that one. This one, 275, is a good one, and that reflects pretty clearly, I think, what the mood of the community is. And I think this council, when it did finally deal with that matter, certainly made the right decision. That is to stick with what we've got, because I mean, a number of us expressed concerns about where the private sector have been taking us, and they're not always successful in what they do. But I just think that's a very interesting one, and somehow should be acknowledged in something. Maybe you're right, I don't know.
Yeah, I take your point, and have we done a press relief on children's services, Madam General Manager? Have we done a... We haven't? Then I think then we should very clearly send a message, because that one surprises me, because we have unions involved. We had ABC involved. I made 2 interviews with the ABC. I think a press release on where we stand on it, so it is extremely clear to the community for 3 years hence. Jobs are safe, kids are going to be looked after, and you've 3 years to determine what you're going to do. So I think you're right, Councillor Halstead. Councillor Scandrett.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Well, I don't actually quite agree with what you just said. And Southern Highland, how's that for a surprise? But the Southern Highland News did publish a report after the meeting, and they did headline jobs saved and all that sort of thing. And I guess that's technically correct, but we gave them a 2-year security with a review after 2 years by the end of 3 years. So they're not safe for eternity, it's safe for 2 to 3 years. So a media release, I think, is a great idea, because you'll be able to clarify that. I moved option 1 on the night, as you know, which was leave it as it is and do the proper business plan just to make sure it is sustainable, just to take it forward. But we wanted to put this 2-3 year thing on it. So yes, I think it's a great idea. Put out the media release, clarify what we've done. This tells me that they're worried still, because they're coming in.
Thank you. I think, yes, well, I don't want to make gaffes on something about people not being able to hear. Councillor Turley.
I would think that probably the petition that was written actually prior to us approving it back in the last, and I'd say that's probably what's happened. It actually probably should have come in the last council meeting when we actually approved the extension. So, and I haven't seen the petition, but I would assume that I haven't seen it, but I would suggest that's probably what's happened. Yeah, it should have come in 2 weeks ago, and then we've endorsed it anyway for 2 more years.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. I think Councillor Turlin's correct with regard to that. But I think what staff said to us on the night, Mr Mayor, if I remember correctly, we put the 2 or 3 years in, but the next council will have to decide, if the federal funding does not come in, that the ratepayers of the Shire will have to fund it. And that is what was said. That's why, my understanding is why those 2 to 3 years were put in there, because we see whether the federal funding comes back. And if it doesn't, you know, the next council will make up its mind that ratepayers support it.
That's right. It will be a determination of whether they continue in 2 to 3 years' time. Okay? But we've made a decision that nobody will be disaffected in that time. Okay. Put the recommendation as moved by Councillor Scandrett and McLaughlin. All in favour? Against? Carried. Councillor Halstead is moving minutes of the Traffic Committee, seconded by Councillor Nelson. Now the minutes are there. Are there any deal with the minutes with the exception, or we just deal with the minutes moved by any Councillor Turland?
Excuse me. What I'd like to see if Councillor Halstead would consider looking at the car park straight across the road here to the west. If we redesign that car park, we could probably pick up 17, 18 brand new car parks as per the one on that side of the police station. There's an extra row on that side than this side.
What item number?
No, it's not. I'm asking if we can actually apply. You'll do it? Good.
Right. Put it, all in favour? Against, carried. We move to minutes of the Finance Committee held on Wednesday the 20th. We're just adopting the minutes. Right. We're not adopting a debate. We're adopting the minutes. Move Councillor Whipper, seconded Councillor Halstead. Any discussion? Put the minutes, all in favour? Against? We're on 16.2 minutes of the Finance, carried. We're now moving to 16.3 minutes of the Traffic Committee held on electronically on the 20th of November. Move Councillor Halstead, seconded by Councillor Andrews. Is there any discussion, Councillor, on this to Councillor Halstead? Then I put it, all in favour, against, carried. 16.4. Minutes of the Environment and Sustainability Advisory Committee on 20th of November. Move Councillors Whipper and Turland. Is there any discussion? Put it, all in favour. Those against, carried. 17.1, page 426. Questions with notice. Water transfer tunnel. Councillor Whipper.
I'm happy to move the recommendation that this be noted, Mr Mayor, but I'd just like to say it was appreciated to have that briefing last Wednesday. My concern still remained, and I made that concern quite obvious to Water New South Wales representatives, that it took 4 months for us as elected representatives to learn anything about this. After the presentation, I didn't feel really, confident that we were being told everything. And listen to this, councillors, from the eyes and ears out there on the ground. A few weeks ago, Sydney Water had an earth-moving company push a new road from Taurus Road to Moresby Hill, in between Kirkland Road and Moresby Hill Road. Pretty sure not many know about it. Well, they're right there. And recently there has been a significant amount of movement in large trucks, etc., through Diamondsfield Road, off the Taurus Road too. Seems that Water New South Wales are pushing ahead regardless of community concern. That's my concern, that we're being kept in the dark about this, councillors. I think there's more to this than we know about, more than this than we're being told. I mean, when you're on the street and when somebody comes to you and says, why weren't you at the public meeting out of Burrowang about this? Why weren't we there? What are you talking about? We didn't know about it. That's why we weren't there. So when we start asking questions, and I had to actually go to Water New South Wales and ask what was going on, got some background, and we find that they'd been on the road trying to sell this little gem to Shoalhaven, to Illawarra, to anybody that had listened, including Wingecarriby Shire Council. But forget about telling anybody that they'd done it. So I'm really suspicious about this. I was on the board of the SCA, and I know that stakeholders committee would have been on top of this, and everybody would have known about it. Water New South Wales are a water corporation. Let's get it. That's pure and simple. It's about delivering water into homes and putting money in your pocket. It's not about anything else. So when the community raise concerns, I think we need to respond to those concerns. I'm hoping we got the presentation from Water New South Wales that they gave on the day. I thank you for circulating that. It took a while for them to deliver that though. I'm suggesting that early in the new year we should invite Water New South Wales down here for a public meeting around this, because I think at the state of the rivers are really, it's been suggested that we might put point 2 in this, and that we invite Water New South Wales to conduct a public information session to affected stakeholders, including council, in relation to this matter early in 2020.
Okay, so the council invite Ward New South Wales to a briefing session, a public?
To provide. I think
To
it's up to
provide?
them to provide this.
A public briefing
a public,
session?
a public briefing session to affected stakeholders, including council, early in 2020. Because...
Councillor, would you accept the third one, and that is that the PowerPoint presentation from Water New South Wales, which has just arrived in our
Yeah, we've got that.
be put on the website?
I don't see why not.
Yeah,
It should be
I
there.
can't see that.
So happy to put that in there, yeah. Because there's something that just doesn't sort of smell right. If they're doing this sort of works, and we're talking about, thousands of tonnes of spoil in Taurus Road that nobody knows
What was
about.
it, 360, wasn't it?
Yeah, and that's in the presentation, so community can start to get their head around what that actually means. I've had calls from people at Berrima saying parts of the Wingecarribee River are drying up. Now, we're assured by Water New South Wales that the environmental flows will continue. Well, they should be continuing now, and we shouldn't be getting dry spots in the Wingecarribee, but we are. So I think any water that's deviated from the river systems and sent through to Avon through a tunnel, which may have other problems as well, needs to be, sort of scrutinised very, very closely. So I'd like your support, councillors, on this, because I think the more information we've got and the more information the community have, I think the better, because informed decisions are always, particularly those that affect our environment and our water systems, particularly now it's critical. We know that. So, so thank you, councillor.
Thank you, Councillor Whipper. Councillor McLaughlin.
Yep, thank you. Look, likewise, Mr Mayor, like Councillor Whipper, I was asked about this, about noise monitoring equipment being put on people's property without any information, and I didn't know about it. Actually, how I found out about it, I rang a past employee who sits on a couple of committees. I won't mention his name, but he used to work for him. He was a manager there, and he told me this has been on the drawing board for about 10 years. So they have been looking at this, and that's fine. But I think Councillor Whipper's right. When the SCA had a board that looked at these things, we probably wouldn't have happened the way it has. With regard to the spoiling thing, I think Mr Paul noted at that time, if there is this amount of money and there is a positive spin-off for our community and our shire with regard to reuse of this, I think we should, not at council's expense, but we should try and get the best advantage we can for that spoil, if it can be reused for capping old tips or whatever, if it's good enough for that, or roads. But hopefully there can be a positive side, because it's going to be a big impact on that road going forward when people drive through the tourist road. It's going to be right in your face, and it's a massive undertaking. The size of the tunnel and the distance going. It's certainly millions and millions of dollars, and I think there are. I guess what is the approval process? Who do they go to? They just come and tell us, and they just go and do it, I guess. So we've just got to cop it. Thank you.
Councillor Turland, Councillor Turland, then Councillor Halstead. Yep.
That all suddenly adds up, because I reported to somebody, I don't know who it was now, it was on a weekend. And what I've been trying, was it you that I rang, Madam Mayor? All the trucks coming down Range Road, turning right, this is from Range Road, east obviously, in the westerly direction, turning right into Old South Road, going out past the airfield. Whole heap of them. I reported to something, was it you, Nick? Me. Oh, Barry, all right, I couldn't remember who it was. It was the weekend and I was in shorts and thongs, I think. So that's probably what it's to do with this tunnel. All of a sudden, click, click. I'd say they're into it in a big way. I must admit I haven't noticed in the last couple of days that I've been in that area, but they'll be tearing up local roads again.
Okay, well, we'll ask them down for a briefing and put the recommendation. All in favour? Those against? Carried. We're on 17.2, question with notice, Finance Committee meeting. Councillor Turland?
Yeah, it's good. Look, the reason why I brought this back is I told you that you cut me down when I was asking questions in relation to the finance. You wouldn't have let me ask the question. And so I tell you, I will bring a question with notice, and here it is, you've got it. But the problem I face is when the questions I wanted to ask, I now have to make them public, which I shouldn't have done if it was made in the budget review. I'll give you, on the 31st of the 3rd, 2019, if you look at the budget there and the documents, we have 2 audit and risks, DGMs, operational. But on this one, and that item is 078, on that one 078 is audit and risk, but a new one's turned up, 031. And the figures, we're talking a budget in March 2019, different than November 19, and I understand one's 1819, one's 1920. I've got all that. But all I wanted was the chance to ask the question, and I was shot down at the finance meeting. So what we've got here now is some other questions I'll ask, and it's quite simple. It says here that we get an annual report. Second last paragraph. I can't remember ever seeing an annual report showing what senior staff get individually. What we've got here is a combination of figures, of which is what I wanted to ask at the finance meeting, but didn't have the chance to ask. So I'm questioning now is we don't have a briefing session in relation to the 2 different reports here, because we have 2 audit and risk on the same document in March, which don't come in November. And I have questions, a lot more questions to ask, and I don't think this is the forum to have it. But it was all because I wasn't given the chance to ask the question in finance.
Councillor Nelson.
When I was working here, Mr Mayor, we used to do the annual report, and the GM and the 3 directors at the time, their salaries are always printed there. So I don't know, I think it's just a matter of Councillor Turlin picking up the phone and talking to the General Manager. He'll get some answers.
Yeah, I think, yes, the staff can make a comment, but can I ask staff, rather than stand back and throw arrows or fire arrows?
You did not give me the opportunity to ask a simple
Well, as
question.
I say, you can
I said I
ring
would
up
bring
the
it
staff.
back, and I did.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Turlin. General Manager.
Every year, an annual report is prepared. It goes to the Office of Local Government by the 30th of November. It is up on the website. If you look under the statutory information section of the annual report, it will provide clearly the total remuneration package of the General Manager in a separate line, and cumulatively the total remuneration package for the 2 DGMs. Oh, it's on page 79, councillors. It's up on the website, and you will get, I thought you were getting a copy of it in your packs last Friday. You haven't, apparently, but you will get it in your packs that go out on Monday. So that information is reported every year.
And as I say, councillors, pick up the phone and speak to staff and get the answers, you know. Don't have a shot at me, just pick up the staff and speak to staff. Pick up the phone and speak to staff. Just makes life so much easier. Councillor Scandal.
Yes, probably just demonstrates we need more clarity and more answering of people on the floor, councillors on the floor. Could I ask when the GM's review committee next meets, please?
The interim review was held on the 22nd of November.
It's been signed off, councillors were present.
Thank you.
And facilitated by Mr Greg Wright.
Okay.
And
you've answered the question.
Everything's
22nd.
done.
Thank you.
I'm
So we'll look forward
I'm
to-
just clarifying, as you
No.
do, Councillor Scandrett,
Well,
on many occasions.
Well, obviously it'll be a report coming to the next council.
No, there won't be a report coming to the next council. It is an interim report. Thank you. There is not a report coming to council. It has been signed off, and you know why we elect committees? Sometimes they're allowed to deal with things that you give them the faith to be dealt with, and it has been dealt with. Thank you. So I put the recommendation, all in favour, moved by councillors, motion moved by councillor Turland and was seconded by councillor McLaughlin. Put it, all in favour, against, carried. We move to 17.3, questions with notice, refusal of notice of motions of council meeting, 27/11/19, page 429. Somebody move that way. Oh, it's been, will it be over again? 17th.
Just move it.
Because it finally came through. Not like this one.
Yes. So the recommendation is, thank you, councillor Whipper. Councillor moved, secondly councillor Markward. Then I put it, all in favour, against, carried. So we move over to 18.1. Notice of motion, Franklin Street proceeds. Councillor Turland.
Well, I'm going to add and open it up for councillors to make a decision where they think they might to spend this money. One of the things that I think that we should add...
Yes, you need a second. Councillor Halstead.
Is the Water Polo Club new clubhouse. It's urgently done. And also the animal shelter that's just been going around for too long now. It needs to be addressed. We have the funds now that's in place.
No, we don't, councillor Turland.
We will have the funds very shortly in place.
I think, councillor, I think this is not the appropriate place to have this,
Now,
the discussion. I think it should be at a briefing session so councillors are aware of the conditions on the sale of Franklin Street, so everybody is on the same page.
we have an opportunity with the money that's going to come in from Franklin Street to prepare to do some works. Not take 2 years and the process, as we were told on the 6th of November in our briefing sessions, could take the chance on the Performing Arts Centre. The other one is the Barra Water Polo Club. 2 years ago, the building burnt down. It cost council nothing to build. And we still today do not have a plan in place to help them build that. We have a request from the Water Polo Club, from Nathaniel Smith, who supported it, but we couldn't, well, they couldn't, I had nothing to do with it, I'm not on the committee anymore, to get a letter of support to go for a grant to rebuild something. The 45,000 that's in the coffer of council should have been developed, a plan in place so that grants could be got. The same thing with the animal shelter. It's been going around for many, many, many years, and we need to bring it to a head in some form. And so I understand the conditions of the sale, but there's a deposit already in the system, and it's not going to last 2 years before the money comes in. It would be probably 8-10 weeks, I would think. Otherwise, you don't have a sale. And I'd be ecstatic if you don't have a sale, because then I'll bring a motion forward to make it the property to be used for community use. But at the moment, there's an opportunity there to start to prepare where we want to spend the money. And if you guys want to add things to other things, I'd be more than happy if you did to it. But I see the Performing Arts Centre in Mittagong, water polo's been dragged around for 2 years, and now we've got potential, the animal shelter, which has just got to happen. How can we stand back on the animal shelter knowing it doesn't comply with occupation and safety health and say this is all we're going to give you? That has to come to an end.
Councillor Turland, read your motion. You aren't talking about an animal shelter. You are talking about
Yes, I am.
heritage. No,
I'm going to put
notice
them in the motion right now.
Well,
with the second.
that's what I'm saying. You haven't got water polo here.
all right.
I think you adding it on. There's policy on the run. It is not good counsel, Councillor Turland. You should be saying, let's have a briefing session and work out whether and where councillors can allocate some funds. This is just airy-fairy stuff pulled out of the ether and put before council, and you're going to be disappointed if councillors don't support it. And I know how councillors are thinking at the moment. Yeah, that's a good idea. I'd like to support that, but let's get some information. And you'll get council support if you word it up that we have an information session to look at the options on the expenditure of the sale of Franklin Street. You'll get unanimous. Here you're going to fracture.
Well, I'm not going to. I'll do it, but I'm not prepared, as I said in the number 3 there. No monies to go to Station Street, the Civic Centre upgrade, or the Birram Road Pass.
And you know, Councillor Turland, I do not support monies from an asset going to repair a pothole or whatever. And I agree with that. Asset for asset, but let's discuss it. Let's sit down and discuss it.
Well,
anyway, you're talking. I'm interrupting it. Just so that.
Going into the budgeting session.
We have a discussion session to discuss it.
Well, I'm still very concerned about the playhouse because this is going to drag on unless we actually make a commitment to it.
Don't try and divide. Don't divide council, Gary. A council.
No, I'm not providing council. I'm making a recommendation. So if you guys want to put in an amendment, you put in an amendment. That's my motion. I've got a mover and a seconder.
Let's go through the motion. Go through the debate.
Well, I have. I'll wait for the response.
Well, thanks, Mr Mayor. I'm going to treat this notice of motion with the respect it deserves and vote no. Vote against it. And just a point of clarification, when Councillor Turland puts up that council used these funds, well, that doesn't quite make sense. You need to spell out Franklin Street proceeds of sale to use.
It's on the top.
Technical matter.
It's on the top.
No, you've got to take the motion as it reads as a literal thing. All right? So anyway, that aside, as a little lesson on writing a notice of motion, which is if he'd talked to the staff, he'd probably get it right. Anyway, this is not how we do business, Mr Mayor. We don't do it by one councillor putting up and dictating how things should be spent. The staff here can't speak on this issue at the moment, so another reason why we should be doing this, as we do every year, in the budget sessions. We'll have a report next year when all the opportunities can be considered, because even now there was some being floated up. Oh, Councillor Whipper, throw me one. Throw me one. Oh, I'll throw you one. Now, for heaven's sake, it's not how we do business. Look, and I really hate to say this, but Councillor Turland didn't get his way with the sale of Franklin Street. We all know he wanted to do something different and the sale went through. So what do you know, the next meeting, here we are, and we've got, let's spend the money. It's not how we do business. So I'm voting no against this.
Okay, thank you. And I've been advised before the meeting that we have the Facebook for 4 hours. Then we have to go offline
No one will see
for
us.
a period of time. How long do we have to go off? 5 minutes. So I'm going to ask that
No, because we'll go offline.
we'll go offline and we should be live streamed. So I'm going to ask that we defer this item for 5 minutes.
Okay.
Because we have the live stream.
Okay.
So I'm asking Councillor Whipper to move that we suspend the meeting for 5 to 7 minutes until we can resume, and that'll be seconded by Councillor Anderson.
Adjourn.
Yes.
The debate for 5 to 7 minutes?
5 to 7 minutes.
So we then come back.
Okay. And then come back.
Okay, so I put that. All in favour, those against. The meeting is now adjourned between 5 and 7 minutes until we can come back.
Why don't we just carry forward items 18.1 on to the next meeting?
We will, because we've got to go into closed.
Close and deal with